That day, Medaka stood quietly, looking at a building that had already collapsed. At some point, Hakama had once asked whether she had ever thought about why she was so gifted. He had told her not to downplay or hide her abilities, because it was obvious that she was far from ordinary. In his view, what Medaka did was not admirable in a normal sense. It was something beyond that. Without warning, a girl named Myoka suddenly rushed in and attacked her using an iron ball. Medaka immediately responded and handled the situation with ease. Later, as Medaka walked toward the suggestion box, she found a letter inside. Hakama explained that the school staff had been struggling to deal with Muri's behavior. He thanked Medaka for everything she had done to help the school so far. He then revealed that Muri had actually been part of a project under his supervision. While Muri was recovering, Hakama hoped Medaka would be willing to take her place. The project was called the Flask Plan. During a school break, Muri told her friends about the Flask Plan. She explained that it was the name of a project she had been forced to join. According to her, the members of Class 13 had been gathered from all over the country specifically for this program. Harigane asked what Class 13 actually meant. Muri was willing to explain. She said there were 3 types of people in the world: normal, special, and abnormal. According to her, most people at Hakaniwa Academy used their individual talents honestly and fairly to complete their responsibilities. She described herself as someone who relied on cheap tricks. However, she insisted that those from Class 13 were far more unusual than she was. To demonstrate, she threw every die she was holding into the air. When they landed, every single one showed the number 6. Her friends were stunned by the display. Laughing, Muri asked whether they were beginning to understand. She explained that she could not clearly define such abilities or talents because for abnormal individuals, effort, environment, and luck were irrelevant. No matter the circumstances, abnormal people would always produce extraordinary, sometimes unsettling, results. The purpose of the Flask Plan, she said, was to cultivate genius, and she herself had been chosen as one of the test subjects. Muri admitted that she felt relieved after Medaka helped her leave that place. Suddenly, Hansode appeared, drawn in by the food on the table. Zankichi quickly tried to stop her and apologized to Muri for Hansode's behavior. Seeing Zankichi approach, Muri greeted him and said that she wanted to talk with him. At the same time, Medaka informed Hakama that she had refused his offer. She explained that she had been born to help strangers, and that was the only purpose she felt she needed. She doubted that she could contribute much to the Flask Plan. Instead, she chose to find another way to make up for the fact that Muri had been removed from the project because of her. After saying her goodbyes, Medaka left. Hakama realized that Medaka was incredibly strong, so strong that her weaknesses had become very clear. He then asked the other students for their opinions. It turned out that many of them had been present the entire time. Kei remarked that Medaka seemed to never notice the existence of others. Shigusa believed that Medaka deliberately ignored them, mentioning that he had tried to defeat her multiple times but had always failed. Itami suggested that Medaka might have only defeated Muri by coincidence, and he admitted that he admired someone like her. Yoka had nothing in particular to say. Mizo did not see the situation as a problem since Medaka was only a temporary replacement, and he was confident that he and Odo could keep the Flask Plan running. Odo commented that Medaka had a beautiful face and that he did not mind her presence. Hakama concluded that, to these students, Medaka, the unusual student council president, was insignificant. He realized that the students of Class 13 were indeed difficult to handle. They were the top group among the experimental participants. Meanwhile, Muri told Zankichi that her older sister, who had spent a long time staying inside her room, would soon be coming to school. She asked Zankichi to pass a message to Medaka. The message said that her sister would target Medaka for openly rejecting the Flask Plan and for defeating Muri. Zankichi wondered whether Muri's older sister was someone incredibly powerful. Muri smiled and said that her sister was extremely strong and unmatched. She also fought using large iron balls. Muri admitted that facing her sister had always been overwhelming, and she felt that it might already be too late to warn Medaka. Meanwhile, Myoga had already taken Medaka down with the iron ball in her hand. Seeing Medaka lying there, unable to move, Myoka calmly muttered a strange sequence of numbers. The loud noise drew students from all directions toward the scene. Omunichi woke Nekami and addressed her as the former judo captain, informing her that her favorite student had gotten into trouble again and that she should come see it for herself. Nekami woke up and asked him not to call her judo captain anymore since she had already retired. Myoga kept repeating the string of numbers that no one else could understand. What she actually meant was that, in order to achieve her goal, she needed to join Class 13, because Medaka had defeated her younger brother Muri. She had expected far more from Medaka and felt disappointed by what she had seen so far. In Myoka's view, defeating Medaka alone would not be enough to secure her place in the Flask Plan. She wondered how many more students from Class 13 she would have to take down to prove her strength. Just as Miyoka was about to leave, Medaka suddenly called out to her. Medaka understood the meaning behind Miyoka's unusual speech pattern and asked who Miyoka really was. She was certain that Muri's older sister had attacked her for reasons beyond simple revenge. Miyoka was surprised that Medaka could interpret her words so quickly. She had believed that only Muri could understand her way of speaking. She was also impressed that Medaka was still able to stand after being struck by the iron ball. At the same time, Miyoka realized that Medaka had not even tried to avoid the attack. Medaka made it clear that she had no reason to dodge it. Miyoka stepped closer and swung the iron ball again, while the surrounding students prepared themselves to watch what they thought would be a serious fight. Miyoka repeatedly swung the iron ball toward Medaka. The students were confused about why Medaka did not attempt to move away, and some of them even wondered if she was acting recklessly. Miyoka launched the iron ball once more, but this time Nekami pulled Medaka aside just in time to prevent the impact. Nekami understood that Medaka would not avoid the attack because Miyoka did not seem to have a clear reason for targeting her. Nekami then asked what Medaka was trying to accomplish this time. The students grew excited at Nekami's arrival. They had been looking forward to her unpredictable behavior, often referring to her as a trickster. Nekami laughed, noticing how energized everyone became when she showed up. Medaka was surprised to realize how well-known Nekami actually was. Nekami admitted that she was nothing compared to Medaka, whose presence and voice carried overwhelming influence. She also wondered why Medaka remained so stubborn when the iron ball she was facing was far harder than her own head. At that moment, Miyoka spoke again in her numeric language, signaling that Nekami should not interfere because this matter concerned people with unusual abilities, not her. Nekami did not understand what Miyoka was saying, but she did not care. She could not accept seeing her close friend being treated so roughly. Nekami prepared herself to confront Miyoka, intending to demonstrate her judo skills. Miyoka recognized Nekami, but doubted that judo techniques would be effective against her. She moved closer to test Nekami's approach. Nekami responded with a strong strike that sent Miyoka flying backward until she hit a wall. The students were shocked to see a former judo fighter use a punch instead of a traditional technique and commented that it seemed unfair. Medaka, however, pointed out that Nekami was not cheating. Omomichi agreed, explaining that while striking might not be allowed in official matches, it could still be considered part of practical self-defense rooted in judo. Nekami laughed and admitted that she had used a clever trick against an opponent who fought straightforwardly, confident that her strike had been powerful enough. Suddenly, Miyoka stood back up and removed the heavy chains wrapped around her arms. She could not overlook what Nekami had just done. Nekami laughed again and wondered if Miyoka would become faster after removing the weighted chains. Her assumption proved correct. Miyoka moved with incredible speed, circling around Nekami and attacking from behind. Without hesitation, she struck Nekami's back, sending her body stumbling forward before she fell to the ground. Miyoka had not expected Nekami to be taken down so quickly by a single blow. Miyoka pulled Nekami's body closer. Medaka shouted in an attempt to wake Nekami, but Omomichi stopped her, saying that Medaka was already too late to act like a hero. Omomichi told Medaka to simply watch, pointing out that none of the spectators seemed worried about Nekami. For some reason, Nekami was known as a judo trickster, and the crowd seemed to expect something unusual. Unexpectedly, Nekami suddenly woke up and grabbed Miyoka instead. The audience cheered loudly, recognizing what they believed to be Nekami's signature comeback move. Nekami remarked that Miyoka had been careless and should never have allowed a judo fighter to get that close. Miyoka was confused about how the situation had turned around so quickly. Nekami was confident that Miyoka would not be able to escape her grip. With a single arm throw, she slammed Miyoka onto the floor. The spectators grew even more excited, while Medaka still struggled to understand what had just happened. Omomichi explained that Nekami had used a technique that would be considered illegal in an official match because she had held the grip for more than 6 seconds, but since this was not a formal competition, the rule did not apply. Miyoka tried to stand again, unwilling to lose so easily. However, Nekami immediately locked him in a tight hold from behind. Nekami believed that a fight should never be considered finished after only one throw. She admitted that she preferred to restrain her opponents and strike from behind, describing it as part of the thrill she felt in judo. Miyoka grew visibly frustrated and muttered angrily. Omomichi asked Medaka if Miyoka had just called Nekami a cheat. Medaka wondered if Omomichi had understood what Miyoka said. Omomichi brushed it off and explained that anyone who fought Nekami usually said the same thing because she often won through clever tactics. Nekami then performed a backward throw that caused Miyoka to lose consciousness, bringing the match to an immediate end. Medical staff quickly carried Miyoka away, though they were unable to move the iron ball he carried with him. Medaka told Nekami that she now understood why Nekami was labeled a trickster and that her methods seemed risky. Nekami explained that she always stepped in to help friends who were being mistreated. Medaka felt touched when Nekami referred to her as a friend. Nekami also wondered why Medaka had allowed Miyoka to strike her earlier without resisting. Medaka admitted that she did not like violence. Nekami agreed that violence was bad, even very bad, but she believed that refusing to resist at times could lead to even greater harm. In Nekami's view, failing to protect what should be protected was no different from allowing damage to happen. She explained that she never hesitated in a fight, because if she waited until she had already lost her friends or allies, all she could do afterward would be seek revenge. Medaka understood Nekami's point. She realized that she had been reacting too slowly, as if she had been playing rock, paper, scissors at a delayed pace. Medaka thanked Nekami for the advice and everything she had shared. She recognized that she had nearly made the same mistake without realizing it. After that, Medaka left the area. Nekami laughed quietly and wondered if she had just awakened a sleeping lion. Meanwhile, Medaka kept thinking about the Flask plan. She suspected that the student council had a responsibility to investigate it. Suddenly, 3 students blocked her path. They were Garaguru, Royal, and Kinri. There were more than 100 students from Class 13 who rarely bothered to attend school, and all of them were aiming for the still open seat in the Class 13 group. This meant that Medaka would likely have many upperclassmen targeting her, leaving her little peace of mind. Medaka acknowledged the situation and prepared herself to move forward. The 3 students advanced together, confident that they could prevent Medaka from getting back up once they attacked her. Unexpectedly, Medaka was able to handle the 3 of them with surprising ease. Earlier, Medaka had told Hakama that she did not believe she was particularly talented. Hakama advised her not to downplay herself, explaining that Medaka was abnormal in the sense that she could perform actions that would be impossible for ordinary people. What Medaka did was not merely impressive, but something beyond normal ability, even among those considered special. For that reason, Hakama placed Medaka in the category of the abnormal. At the same time, Zenkichi asked Hansode about the Flask plan, since Hansode was considered to be related to Hakama. Hansode explained that she was only one of Hakama's grandchildren. She suggested that Zenkichi should focus on Medaka and quickly deliver the message from Muri. Suddenly, Odo intercepted them and demanded to know where Medaka was. As Zenkichi walked with Hansode, they were suddenly stopped by Odo, who demanded to know where Medaka was. Hansode vanished the moment Zenkichi looked away. Zenkichi felt puzzled, noticing how Hansode always seemed to disappear whenever a situation turned tense. Odo fixed Zenkichi with a sharp stare and ordered him to kneel. Zenkichi did not understand why his body moved on its own and dropped to the ground before Odo. At that moment, he could not control his body at all. Odo demanded to know the location of the suggestion box. Zenkichi felt confused and deeply uneasy, unable to grasp what was happening, while wondering what Odo intended to do to Medaka. Suddenly, Mizo appeared and explained that resisting was useless. Odo's first special ability, known as weighted words, made it impossible for anyone to defy his commands. Mizo also described Odo as someone who believed that everyone in the world existed to serve him, and suggested that Zenkichi would be better off simply obeying. Odo had not expected Mizo to be following him and seemed impressed that Mizo had managed to conceal his presence so well. Odo praised Mizo, but also told him not to reveal too much about his abilities. Mizo smiled and said that, as Odo's ears, speaking up was part of his role. He informed Odo that someone nearby was mimicking his movements. It turned out that Medaka had already arrived. She explained that she had been searching for Zenkichi and did not expect to find him in such a serious situation. Medaka stated that she did not mind Zenkichi being friends with anyone other than Hansode, but she did not expect to see him kneeling before Odo. She felt that Zenkichi was not considering her feelings. Odo greeted Medaka, but admitted that he did not appreciate her rude behavior. Zenkichi felt frustrated that he could do nothing, yet he believed that Odo would not be able to command Medaka. Unexpectedly, Medaka also lowered herself before Odo. Odo believed this was Medaka's first encounter with someone he considered superior, and he assumed that her posture showed respect. He lifted Medaka's head and asked whether she had seen him before. Medaka admitted that she had once seen Odo in the principal's office and was certain that he was part of the Flask plan. Odo felt relieved that Medaka had noticed his presence back then. Zenkichi grew increasingly anxious, wondering what Odo intended to do next. To everyone's surprise, Odo declared that he had developed feelings for Medaka at first sight. Medaka was clearly startled by this statement. Odo claimed that he was interested in her and stated that he would allow her to become his wife. Medaka's face turned red as she looked at Odo. At that moment, Zenkichi suddenly regained control of his body. He leaped forward, preparing to strike Odo, unable to accept how Odo had treated his childhood friend. Odo appeared surprised that Zenkichi could stand. He admitted that he was impressed, but he regarded Zenkichi's action as foolish and disruptive to what he called his romantic conquest, and implied that Zenkichi would face serious consequences. Mizo quickly restrained Zenkichi from behind. Odo questioned Mizo's action. Mizo calmly stated that Odo had gone too far. Zenkichi struggled and demanded to be released. Mizo pointed out that Odo had a bad habit of punishing the weak too quickly. He reminded Odo that if he did not begin to control his temper, he would never achieve the ideal world he envisioned. Odo apologized and remarked that Mizo tended to be overly dramatic with his choice of words. He then handed Medaka a letter and prepared to leave, asking her to read it. Odo explained that the letter contained an invitation for a date, which he believed would give them the chance to talk more extensively. Medaka responded that Odo kept making unreasonable demands after previously attempting inappropriate behavior toward her. She firmly stated that she had no intention of entertaining his request. Odo asked Medaka not to be stubborn. He expressed his belief that Medaka had felt something unusual during her encounter with Muri, and claimed that he possessed even greater potential. Odo invited Medaka to join Group 13. Before leaving, he advised her not to waste her life on ordinary people, insisting that she had not been born to serve strangers. He insisted that she had been born to serve him. After Odo left, Mizo released Zenkichi. Mizo seemed surprised that Odo had spoken so much, which was unlike him. Before Mizo departed, Zenkichi called out to him and thanked him for stepping in. Mizo laughed and commented that Zenkichi was amusing. He advised Zenkichi to be more careful from now on. Whether or not Zenkichi chose to take part in the Flask plan, Odo had already set his sights on him, meaning Zenkichi's school life would no longer be ordinary. After that, Medaka shared that she had met Muri's older sister. Zenkichi asked why Medaka had been unable to move earlier while he was still able to resist. Medaka did not know the reason. She admitted that she had kissed many people before, but no one had ever kissed her, which left her feeling a bit curious about the experience. Zenkichi apologized for causing a disturbance earlier. Medaka did not mind at all and even felt grateful for what had happened. The letter from Odo contained a request to meet on July 15 at 5:00 a.m. on top of the clock tower of Class 313. Medaka thought that she probably needed to improve herself. In her view, Odo was shamelessly bold for asking her to become his wife. Even though she did not intend to take the letter seriously, she believed she could use this opportunity to guide Odo onto a better path. Zenkichi noticed how wide Medaka's smile was and how genuinely happy she looked. He understood that Medaka truly wanted to be friends with everyone. However, because of her extraordinary talent, she had never really succeeded in forming equal friendships, not even with him. It made sense that she felt especially happy about this situation, particularly with someone as unusual and imposing as Odo. Zenkichi realized that if he wanted to stand beside Medaka, he would have to become stronger himself. Zenkichi asked what Medaka planned to do to improve herself and whether she intended to train. Medaka said that she would go see her older brother, which surprised Zenkichi. She even asked him to come along because she did not want to face her brother alone. Medaka and Zenkichi then went to meet Medaka's older brother. It had been a long time since Medaka had last seen him. His name was Mahoro. At Hakoniwa Academy, there was an old building that had not been used for 40 years. People called it Babel Ghost. The caretaker of that abandoned building was Magoro, Medaka's older brother. Medaka and Zenkichi entered the building, and Magoro greeted them as soon as they arrived. His room was filled with photographs of Medaka. Magoro was overjoyed to see Medaka visiting him after such a long time. He expressed how much he loved her, and nearly everything in the room had a Medaka theme. Even the sandals he wore had her image on them. Medaka felt extremely uncomfortable, but Zenkichi encouraged her to try to smile. After taking a deep breath, Medaka spoke gently to Magoro and apologized for not visiting him for so long. She also asked him to come home once in a while. Unexpectedly, Magoro took photos of Medaka while she was talking. Medaka mentioned that their father and mother were very worried about him, but Magoro claimed that he did not know who they were. He held Medaka tightly and said that she only needed him. He buried his face in her hair, and in an instant, Medaka's expression turned fierce. With a single punch, Magoro was sent flying backward. Zenkichi quickly stepped in to calm Medaka and reminded her that they had come to ask Magoro for help. Medaka immediately stated that she had come to ask for his help and warned that she would not tolerate being ignored. She then apologized for striking him. Zenkichi was puzzled by how quickly Medaka's demeanor could change. Magoro realized that Medaka had grown weaker. He observed that her muscle condition had declined and that she had already lost half of her original strength back in the early days of middle school. From the way Medaka had moved, Maguro noticed that she was guarding her left side, suggesting that her ribs might be injured. Her skin also indicated that she had not been getting enough sleep, and there was a faint scratch on her head, even though in the past her injuries would heal in less than 30 minutes. Medaka had grown taller, but her weight had not changed. Maguro was convinced that she was not paying attention to what she ate. Zenkichi was amazed that Maguro could draw so many conclusions from just a brief physical encounter. It was clear that Maguro was an exceptionally sharp analyst and a genius. Before entering grade school, Maguro had appeared completely normal. His talent began to blossom during middle school. Although Maguro rarely acted directly, he was almost godlike when it came to developing strategies for others. At the age of 13, Maguro began working from behind the scenes as a consultant for his family's business. He was largely responsible for transforming the Kurokami Group from one of the largest companies in Japan into a global powerhouse. Maguro was born with a natural strategic mind capable of handling anything placed before him. Not long after Maguro commented that Zenkichi had worked incredibly hard and was almost unrecognizable, Zenkichi was reminded of something Maguro had said in the past. Back then, Maguro had bluntly told him that he was too weak to stand beside Medaka, and had even advised him to keep his distance from her. Remembering how harsh Maguro used to be made it difficult for Zenkichi to fully accept the compliment now. Medaka expressed her desire to become stronger and asked Maguro to train her. Maguro felt that Medaka did not really need his help, but she disagreed. She admitted that she still could not properly protect herself or her friends. In her view, if she was not strong enough to protect everyone, then she felt powerless. Maguro had not expected to hear those words from her. Medaka clarified that this was not the only reason she had come to see him. She also wanted to ask everything Maguro knew about the Flask plan. Maguro asked if the Flask plan was some kind of scientific experiment. Medaka told him not to pretend to be clueless. She explained that she had only heard a brief explanation about the plan from Hakama, and was certain that Maguro must have been involved when he was still a student there. Out of nowhere, Maguro began talking about how much he enjoyed playing RPG games and how he liked to raise every character, no matter how weak, all the way up to level 99. In other words, he compared himself to a level 99 charm, because analysis, consultation, and management were his specialties. As someone with those abilities, he found satisfaction in helping others reach their full potential. He then revealed that the Flask plan was essentially the creation of artificial genius. Maguro had once been a member of Class 13, and his ability had been viewed as that of a coach. However, he chose not to socialize with the others and left shortly after. The price he had to pay to leave the Flask plan was severe, involving the loss of several vital parts of his body and a significant portion of his time and energy. Hearing this, both Medaka and Zenkichi were shocked. Maguro made it clear that he did not need sympathy from Medaka, nor did he expect her to seek revenge on his behalf. He described his experience as being given a chance to witness something like a living hell. Although he possessed a great deal of information about the Flask plan, he chose not to share it because he did not want Medaka to suffer the same fate. Maguro admitted that he did not believe in the typical ideas of friendship, perseverance, or winning slogans. For him, his greatest motivation in life was his younger sister. He believed that he had been born to earn Medaka's respect. Because of that, he did not want to talk about the Flask plan, but he was willing to share everything else. He offered to help Medaka reach level 99, describing the process as a kind of simulation game focused on improving her abilities. He questioned whether Medaka could endure his style of training, which would require close supervision throughout the process. Medaka decided that she would find out the truth about the Flask plan on her own, and she also stated that she would help Maguro become a true human being again. Zenkichi was confused by the exchange between the siblings and felt that it might be difficult to ask Maguro to train him as well. Suddenly, he remembered Medaka's date with Odo the next morning and mentioned it. Maguro then unexpectedly offered to train Zenkichi too. He realized that his words in the past had probably hurt Zenkichi deeply, but he acknowledged how hard Zenkichi had worked. Maguro wanted to help him become stronger so that he could protect Medaka. Zenkichi felt strangely moved by Maguro's kindness. Even though it was simply a normal gesture, he turned his face away and accepted the offer. The training began right away as Maguro led them to the monster room. He explained that Path A involved experiencing extreme challenges with no guarantee of improvement, while Path B offered an easier route to getting stronger after a nap. Without hesitation, both Zenkichi and Medaka chose Path A. Odo waited for Medaka at the top of a tower. He said the earth felt too small for him, and even the sun was not bright enough to fully illuminate his presence. That was why he chose a high place to watch the sunrise. As he observed the sun rising, he reaffirmed his own sense of greatness. He described the sun as a mirror for himself, which was also the reason he picked such a lofty spot as the meeting place with Medaka. He hoped Medaka would witness his magnificence before she became his wife. Medaka arrived with Zenkichi. She admitted that Odo's choice of location felt oddly romantic, but she also said she did not have enough time to stand in front of a mirror or prepare her appearance. Odo said he could forgive Medaka's unprepared look since she arrived on time, but he could not accept the presence of another man while she was supposed to be meeting him. Medaka clarified that she did not come as a woman meeting a man, but as the president of the student council. She asked what Odo knew about the Flask plan. Odo praised Medaka's passion, saying she perfectly matched the kind of woman he had been searching for. He then ordered them to kneel. Medaka and Zenkichi resisted the pressure with their own strength and refused. Odo raised his voice again, telling them to bow even lower, but they continued to stand their ground. He was surprised that they dared to oppose him. Medaka mentioned that she and Zenkichi had spent the night training under a very talented coach, and she said their hard work had paid off. Hearing this, Odo immediately guessed that the coach she referred to was Maguro. He described it as something almost unbelievable, since such intense training in just one night could turn a house cat into a tiger. Odo grew frustrated when his commands had no effect. He stepped forward as if to approach Medaka more forcefully, but Zenkichi raised his voice. Zenkichi pointed out that Odo had never truly spoken to Medaka, because every word he said was an order rather than a conversation. Odo became irritated, wondering why Zenkichi kept interfering in what he considered a personal matter. He called Zenkichi rude and demanded to know what kind of relationship he had with Medaka. He told Zenkichi to leave before he pushed him away himself. Zenkichi, fueled by emotion, moved quickly and struck Odo, declaring that he was Medaka's childhood friend. Odo's body was sent backward by the impact. Zenkichi knew that his move alone would not be enough to defeat Odo, and he challenged him to get back up. Medaka reminded Zenkichi that fighting in such a high place was dangerous. Zenkichi wondered why she was still concerned about that after Odo had just tried to advance toward her. Zenkichi was shocked to see Odo standing calmly on the wall, completely unharmed. Odo complimented the strength of Zenkichi's attack. He said he had no intention of avoiding it, but added that an ordinary person like Zenkichi should not presume to touch a king. Odo repeated that the earth was too small for him, and that gravity itself could not hold him down. His feet clung to the wall as if it were the ground, and his strength allowed him to move freely along it. Odo revealed that Group 13 was being used as test subjects. He told Medaka that if she truly insisted on helping others, she should be willing to cooperate with this effort. Medaka admitted that she sometimes acted before thinking, but she was not foolish enough to join a project she did not fully understand. Maguro then gave a comparison. He asked whether Medaka would drink a potion if it could instantly make someone a genius. Medaka and Zenkichi firmly rejected the idea. Odo had expected Medaka to answer that way, but he pointed out that most people would make a different choice. In reality, he said, people rarely refuse an opportunity like that. Odo explained that the goal of the Flask plan was to create a genius potion for those who worked hard and tried their best, but never received the rewards they deserved. Medaka responded that Odo was promoting an idea that sought benefits without effort, sacrifice, or real work. She questioned whether Odo felt no embarrassment in refusing to make sacrifices while expecting others to do it for him. According to Medaka, if the Flask plan were truly comfortable and harmless, Maguro would never have stepped away from it. Odo admitted that sacrifices were indeed required. The Flask plan, he said, would only be completed by sacrificing every student at Hakoniwa Academy. He added that once the curriculum was established, Hakoniwa Academy itself would become like a giant experimental container. He predicted that 98% of the test subjects would break under the burden of becoming abnormal. Instead of a storm in a teacup, he said, they would create a storm inside a bottle. Zenkichi felt irritated and called the whole thing abnormal. He could not understand why Odo would even agree to something like that. Odo explained that the principal was doing it in the name of a noble ambition, but to him it was simply a job. In return, he would receive 4 of the subjects as a reward. They would be given the title of the 4 divas in Odo's future kingdom, and Medaka would become the first queen of the country he dreamed of building. Medaka was puzzled. She realized that Odo had summoned her only to present that ridiculous proposal. Odo was confident that Medaka would agree to join Group 13. He explained that the Flask plan was being carried out in a laboratory beneath the tower, and he urged Medaka to come with him right away because everyone was already waiting for her. Zenkichi asked Medaka what they should do next. To him, the project seemed far bigger than he had imagined. Medaka calmly replied that it was not as overwhelming as he thought. She believed this was exactly the moment she had to act, especially after being called to the principal's office. In her view, this was precisely when the student council needed to step in. She was certain she could stop the Flask plan that very day. The next day, Medaka and Zenkichi checked the suggestion box. Every letter inside was related to Class 13. The sudden arrival of the Class 13 members at school had confused everyone. Even the disciplinary committee seemed overwhelmed, something Harigane had previously complained about. Other letters mentioned how the members of Class 13 were causing trouble among themselves. Medaka felt that she might not be in a position to comment much. She also realized that her mini-uniform had unintentionally created distractions and complications. Zenkichi thought there was little point in reviewing all the complaints one by one. In his opinion, they needed to address the root of the problem. Without hesitation, Medaka removed her outer layer of clothing so she could move more freely and told Zenkichi they needed to hurry to the laboratory beneath the clock tower. Zenkichi became flustered at how suddenly she acted. He wondered what would happen to Koki and Mokana. Medaka decided to leave them in charge of the student council's routine duties. She explained that she was simply doing what was necessary to fulfill her responsibilities as student council president. When Medaka and Zenkichi arrived at the laboratory, they were greeted by Uno and Shano. Medaka introduced herself as the student council president and asked if they were also part of Group 13. It turned out that Uno and Shano were merely guards. They instructed Medaka to pass through a special door by entering a 6-digit password, explaining that the odds of guessing it correctly were 1 in a million. They referred to it as the rejection door. Medaka agreed to try. She entered the password, and before long the door opened. Uno and Shano were stunned by what they had just witnessed. Medaka stepped inside and expressed her confidence that Zenkichi would be able to do the same. She advised him to pretend as if he were entering his ATM PIN. She casually mentioned that, according to that day's horoscope, a Leo would have good luck at that moment. Once the door closed again, Uno and Shano told Zenkichi to input the password. They were certain he would fail because he was a normal person. Zenkichi tried to concentrate, but suddenly Koki and Mokana approached him. Koki pointed out that there were millions of possible 5-digit combinations and suggested that Zenkichi might need to try all of them since he was, after all, normal. Koki was sure Medaka was waiting for him on the other side. Zenkichi was surprised to see Koki and Mokana there. They explained that Muri had informed them. Koki felt it would not be right for them to stay uninvolved. Zenkichi wondered where Hansode was, since information like that had somehow spread. He admitted that this task was far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. Mokana responded that she was not afraid of danger, but she was afraid of being left behind. Uno and Shano asked whether the three of them really intended to try millions of combinations. Koki invited Mokana to attempt it first. Mokana confidently entered a password, and to everyone's surprise, the door immediately opened. Uno and Shano could hardly believe it. The door was supposedly meant to allow only abnormal individuals through. Mokana wondered if that meant she herself was considered abnormal. Zenkichi was equally shocked. Koki reasoned that the door might be choosing people who were somehow connected to Medaka. In other words, the door would always open for her. If they entered the number that Medaka would most likely choose next, they might be able to pass through as well. Hearing that, Zenkichi remembered Medaka's earlier words. She had been certain he could enter the door. She had also mentioned the ATM PIN and the Leo horoscope. Koki concluded that the password must be Zenkichi's birth date. Zenkichi was surprised that Mokana seemed to know his birth date. Uno and Shano commented that the previous number was no longer valid and joked that Koki had lost to Mokana. Koki brushed it off, claiming he had only allowed her to go first because it would be risky for a girl to witness his true abilities. Koki picked up a candlestick and walked straight toward the rejection door. He admitted that he was not like Medaka and Mokana, who were willing to follow the rules of the game. Instead, he chose to destroy the door entirely. Uno and Shano were stunned by what he was doing. After his first strike, Koki admitted that the door was incredibly sturdy, but he had no intention of giving up. He declared that he would deliver 1,000,000 blows if he had to. To him, anyone who relied on hard work during difficult times would eventually succeed. Watching this, Zenkichi almost remembered Koki's nickname from middle school, the Destroyer. It did not take long before Koki actually broke the door down. Proudly, he said that his effort had paid off and that it had taken exactly 152 swings to get through it. Koki then asked Zenkichi to follow him, since the task required every member of the student council. After passing through the door, they found yet another one ahead. Uno and Shano explained that the elevator door in front of them would take them to the 13th basement level of the Flask plan. The only other route was to use the stairs without a password, which meant visiting every single floor along the way. Medaka said that she and her friends had come to the laboratory to gather information, so they would examine every aspect of the Flask plan. Meanwhile, Hakama observed Medaka from his room. He did not expect her to bring so many companions and wondered how Hansode had arranged all of this. Hansada admitted that she had only given them a small push. Hakama realized that the more people who accompanied Medaka, the easier it became to measure just how extraordinary Medaka appeared to those who were not part of the Flask plan. Hansada confessed that she cared more about the Flask plan than anything else in the world and believed that Hakama would have difficulty if he had to consider all three of them as obstacles. Hansode said that Medaka had a powerful influence on the people around her, which was exactly why she disliked Medaka. She refused to consider Kalki and Mokana as anything special. Hakama noted that it was unusual for Hansode to give such a warning, but he appreciated it. As Kalki walked down the corridor with Zenkichi, he said that when he met a member of Group 13, he would show his respect by striking him directly. Kalki was still furious that the student council had nearly been wiped out by Muri because of their own passiveness. He refused to let something like that happen again. He did not care what would be said to him, or what might be thrown at him. He would not hesitate anymore. Zenkichi replied that he would not let Kalki claim that honor alone. Kalki then made a bet with Zenkichi about who would land the first strike. At the same time, Medaka felt as if they had been going in circles for a while. She suggested that Mokana use a trick they had once used when entering a maze at an amusement park. Kalki and Zenkichi were surprised to learn that the two of them had gone to an amusement park together without inviting them. Mokana took a deep breath and released a loud shout, while Medaka carefully listened to the sound waves that echoed through the space. Kalki and Zenkichi complained about the noise, saying it was loud enough to hurt their ears. Medaka explained that she used the sound to figure out the layout of the rooms inside the building. It worked much like sonar on a submarine. Zenkichi realized that this explained why Mokana could move so powerfully in the water. He became convinced that her lung capacity must be extraordinary. Before long, a man greeted them and said that Medaka seemed to have taken the wrong path. Kalki and Zenkichi immediately rushed forward, competing to reach him first, but the man easily avoided their attempts. They wondered how he could move so effortlessly. Medaka admitted that the man looked familiar because she had seen him once in the principal's office. In an instant, the man casually loosened Medaka's hair. The man introduced himself as Shigusa, someone with exceptional combat abilities. He told Medaka that if she wanted to pass, she would have to take part in his experiment. Medaka accepted the challenge, seeing it as a chance to measure how much she had improved. Medaka agreed to take part in the experiment that Shigusa had prepared. She wanted a chance to see how far she had progressed. Shigusa smiled and said that this was exactly what he expected from a perfect student council president. Still, in his view, the Flask plan existed because humans were not yet perfect, and that meant Medaka herself was not perfect either. He promised that he would expose Medaka's weaknesses. In his hand, he held a small flash drive that contained all of his research data. He had already heard that Medaka had come to stop the Flask plan. He gave her a reason to fight and was confident that she would not be able to take the flash drive from him by force. Medaka steadied herself and prepared for a fistfight. Shigusa admitted that Medaka had an impressive and intimidating presence. To him, there seemed to be some kind of secret that had turned her from an ordinary girl into something far more extraordinary. Medaka allowed Shigusa to make the first move. Unexpectedly, he drove his knee toward her. Kalki, Mokana, and Zenkichi were startled by the sudden action. Zenkichi quickly realized that Shigusa was a kickboxer, not a boxer, and muttered that it was a dirty move. Medaka immediately corrected him, saying that Nekami would probably laugh if she heard that complaint. Shigusa was shocked to see that Medaka blocked the knee strike with her forehead. He followed up with a kick and wondered why Medaka did not try to dodge it. Her body was sent flying backward and she fell hard. Seeing this, Zenkichi, Kalki, and Mokana rushed toward her. Medaka suddenly remarked that if it were not for Maguro's training, her head might not have been able to withstand that impact. She then stated that she had already won because she had managed to take Shigusa's flash drive. Shigusa was stunned to realize that Medaka had chosen not to avoid his kicks so she could grab the flash drive. He finally understood why Muri had failed to defeat her, but he still claimed that he was the strongest member of Group 13. He suggested that Medaka should simply give up. Medaka seemed confused by what Shigusa was saying because she had actually been about to tell him that she had been very lucky that day. Suddenly, the flash drive was back in Shigusa's hand. No one realized how he had done it. His movement had been incredibly quick. Zenkichi noticed that this was the same ability Shigusa had used earlier when he walked past them without being noticed. Shigusa admitted that his large build often missiled people, but as a researcher, the flash drive meant more to him than anything else. Medaka smiled calmly. Zenkichi wondered if she was acknowledging that Shigusa was stronger than her. She admitted that Shigusa was indeed powerful, and that was exactly why her good luck felt even stronger that day. In her view, if she could forcibly take the flash drive from him, she would not need to worry about the other opponents afterward. Shigusa was surprised by her reaction. Medaka remained optimistic and never once broke eye contact. Medaka felt that Chigusa's movements were strange because he seemed to change position before anyone could even notice. She suspected that he either thought very briefly before acting, or perhaps did not think at all. Suddenly, Medaka took out Muri's super balls. She had picked them up earlier, thinking they might come in handy. She immediately threw them toward Chigusa. Using his ability, he avoided every single one without being hit. Everyone was stunned by the display. Medaka described Chigusa as incredibly fast. He avoided the projectiles in a mechanical way. In other words, his movements were purely reflexive. The stimulus bypassed his brain and went straight to his muscles. Unlike most people who think before acting, Chigusa could respond instantly without delay. Zenkichi finally understood. That was why Chigusa always seemed to move first and appear out of nowhere. Medaka said she had never heard of anyone with reflexes sharp enough to immediately counterattack and grab objects at the same time. Chigusa admitted that he was born abnormal, with reflexes far beyond normal human limits. He compared himself to a fighter jet on autopilot. He also explained that while his body fought automatically, his brain was close to uncovering the secret behind Medaka's near perfection. Zenkichi suggested that Medaka use her cloning technique to overwhelm Chigusa's reflexes. Chigusa asked whether she was serious about using clones. Medaka immediately activated the technique, creating multiple images of herself as she advanced toward him. Zenkichi felt certain that this would finally overcome Chigusa's reflex ability. However, the unexpected happened. Chigusa managed to grab Medaka's arm. He explained that what he relied on was not conscious reaction, but pure reflex. He did not need to know which one was the real Medaka until the final moment. With that, he forcefully bent her arm, leaving her unable to use it. Zenkichi, Mokana, and Koki rushed forward to help her, but Medaka stopped them. She insisted that this was a one-on-one fight and did not want any interference. Zenkichi could not understand why she was still being so stubborn. Chigusa confidently claimed that he could handle 3 opponents at once on autopilot. To his surprise, the flash drive was already in Medaka's hand. Medaka calmly stated that a broken arm was a small price to pay to stop Flask's plan. She then placed the flash drive against her chest and asked whether Chigusa had already figured out her secret. Chigusa realized that Medaka had taken the flash drive at the exact moment her arm was broken. In his view, Medaka seemed to have no natural reflexes at all. While he was twisting and snapping her arm, she had been completely focused on grabbing the flash drive instead. That was something no normal human would do. Chigusa concluded that Medaka had no reflexes because she manually controlled every part of her body. Mokana suddenly understood why Medaka had not tried to dodge any of the attacks. According to Chigusa, if Medaka manually controlled her muscles, she could draw out her true potential. She could program her body to do anything she wanted. In his eyes, Medaka truly was a monster. Zenkichi realized that this information about Medaka having no reflexes had never been hidden. He began to think that Medaka might have come to the academy as a test subject for the Flask plan. Chigusa suddenly laughed and pointed out that their fight was a contest of extraordinary reflexes, yet Medaka did not have any. Medaka admitted that she had no real reason to fight Chigusa. Then it became clear that the earlier flash drive was not the real one. Chigusa's research data would never fit on a 16 GB device. He pulled out the actual flash drive containing his research. Koki recognized the situation as just as dangerous as when they fought Muri. The opponent's abilities always seemed to be the complete opposite of Medaka's. Zenkichi remembered that Muri despised humanity, Odo was consumed by ego, and Chigusa relied entirely on autopilot reflexes. The members of Group 13 were all completely opposite to Medaka. It almost felt as if Medaka had been gathered to fill in the parts of herself that were missing. Medaka admitted that she could not afford to sacrifice another arm. She said she would participate in Chigusa's experiment just a little longer. She believed that, for now, Chigusa's reflexes might be incredibly fast, but that did not necessarily mean they were optimal. When Zenkichi saw Medaka take off her shoes, he warned everyone to back away immediately. He was sure they were within a dangerous range. Chigusa wondered what Zenkichi was so worried about. He questioned whether Medaka was about to create clones or something similar, but he was confident that such a tactic would not work. Medaka denied that idea. She said she would not duplicate herself again. Instead, she said she would disappear. Medaka began jumping lightly in place. Chigusa was confused by what she was doing. As she landed, he felt as if he were watching fireworks burst before his eyes. Medaka's voice seemed to slow down. Zenkichi recognized the technique and called it Kurokami Phantom. In an instant, Medaka struck Chigusa with tremendous force, causing the entire room to shake. Chigusa neither heard nor saw anything. All he felt was Medaka vanishing, followed by his body being sent flying. There was no sound for his reflexes to react to. Shigusa began to wonder whether Medaka had moved faster than sound or even light. Medaka denied that possibility, since it would be impossible for a human. She explained that she had simply been jumping in a steady rhythm and waited for the exact moment Shigusa blinked before moving at full speed. The flash drive Medaka wanted was destroyed in the process, but she felt satisfied because she had defeated Shigusa. Shigusa swore that he would never blink again during a fight. He could not believe that Medaka had overcome his reflexes. Medaka then admitted that her muscles had torn from pushing her strength too far. Because she was still an ordinary human, her body collapsed to the floor, and Zenkichi quickly rushed to help her. He could not understand why she had used such a self-destructive technique. He realized that Medaka had ignored the pain and forced her body beyond its limits to suppress her lack of reflexes. She had clearly misused her own body and should never have crossed that line. At that moment, Shigusa finally understood. Medaka had manually overridden the autopilot functions that normally could not be ignored, all to maximize her speed. He thought that studying Medaka's body would be the only way to replace the data that had just been lost. Medaka stood back up and suggested that they should call the match a draw since both of them were already injured. She even said she no longer had a reason to keep fighting because the research data had been destroyed. Earlier, Medaka had thought that Shigusa might not even be able to stand again. She started to walk away, but Shigusa stopped her. Shigusa told Medaka that she still had a reason to fight, and that reason was Medaka herself. She admitted that Medaka was the kind of monster she had always wanted to talk to. Shigusa then wondered if Medaka did not feel the same way about her. Zenkichi suggested that Medaka should just ignore Shigusa's words, but Medaka refused his advice. With a cheerful expression, Medaka admitted that she really wanted to talk to Shigusa using her fists. Zenkichi could do nothing but support her decision. Medaka stepped closer to Shigusa and invited her to resume the fight. Shigusa threw a punch toward Medaka, and Medaka welcomed the attack with enthusiasm. The two of them began exchanging blows again. Koki, Mokana, and Zenkichi watched in shock. Koki wondered why Shigusa was not using her reflexes to dodge. Mokana guessed that perhaps Shigusa was no longer able to do so. Zenkichi thought that with injuries like that, Shigusa's body could no longer keep up with her reflexes, meaning the fight would soon end. Unexpectedly, Shigusa had actually been waiting for someone who could hit her like that. That was the reason she joined the Flask plan. She believed that anyone capable of landing a hit on her must have great potential. Unfortunately, none of the members of Group 13 had ever been able to even touch her. The abnormal testing tube had given her no real opportunities, but at last, she had found a true monster who could strike her. That discovery made her incredibly happy. Medaka was surprised to realize how much Shigusa was enjoying the fight. At the same time, Medaka herself also felt that this battle was a form of communication between them. Medaka admitted that she was running out of energy and wanted to bring the fight to an end. Shigusa objected, saying that she still wanted to continue enjoying the moment. Shigusa then recalled her past. Since childhood, her reflexes had been extraordinary. She used to dodge balls thrown by her friends with ease. She had even survived a tragic accident that claimed the lives of her entire family because her reflexes allowed her to avoid harm. At that moment, Shigusa avoided Medaka's strike with her reflexes once again. Mokana was surprised to see Shigusa's reflexes finally working properly again. Zenkichi observed that this was now a combination of reflex and counterattack. Previously, Shigusa had relied entirely on her reflexes, but through her fight with Medaka, she had learned and grown. She had become as fast as lightning while staying in complete control, and at that moment, Shigusa truly became the strongest she had ever been. Shigusa laughed and said that the fight was not over yet. However, Medaka suddenly managed to strike Shigusa's head with her foot. Medaka admitted that she had completely run out of strength, and her leg had simply moved on its own natural reflex. Shigusa's body began to weaken. She had not expected Medaka to be so remarkable and capable of matching her abnormal abilities. As Shigusa collapsed to the floor, Medaka ended the match. She commented that the fight had been wonderful and even invited Shigusa to play with her again the next day. Meanwhile, Hakama observed that abnormals seemed to long for connection. They desired friends, affection, people who understood and protected them, and even rivals. However, because they were seen as inhuman monsters, they could try as hard as they wanted, yet they would never truly be able to build ordinary relationships. That was why they kept searching for connection. Oda wanted to build his own kingdom, Shigusa needed physical contact to feel connected, and Medaka believed she was born to help strangers. Hakama concluded that encountering another monster they had been searching for all along could change their way of thinking. Hansade then asked who would be waiting for Medaka on the second floor. Hakama replied that the one waiting there was Kei from Class 313. He believed Medaka would be fortunate to face Kei, as Kei was known for being responsible for numerous serious incidents in the past. Medaka and her friends moved up to the next level of the laboratory and unexpectedly found a garden inside. Zenkichi felt confused because they had clearly been descending underground stairs, yet they had arrived in a place that looked like an outdoor garden. Medaka explained that it seemed the labyrinth had manifested within the garden space. The air circulation and lighting had been carefully adjusted to mimic the outside environment. Suddenly, a man who was already there remarked that if Medaka and the others had truly noticed that detail, they should have closed the door behind them. Zenkichi quickly turned around and shut the door. Medaka then asked whether the man in front of her was a member of Group 13. The man introduced himself as Kei, a member of Group 13. Mokana wondered why Kei had not tried to stop them from advancing. Kei admitted that he disliked conflict and did not have any reason to force Medaka to join Group 13. Medaka invited her friends to continue to the next floor, but unexpectedly, Kei drew his sword and sliced off a lock of Medaka's hair. Everyone was shocked by what had just happened. Kei believed Medaka must have been wondering where the sword had come from. He explained that he was a master of weaponry, with various hidden weapons concealed across his body. Zenkichi grew anxious when he realized that Kei had actually been aiming for Medaka's neck. He wondered why Medaka had not relied on instinctive combat reflexes like she had during her fight with Shigusa. Medaka calmly stated that she had assumed Kei would not waste time playing around with her. Kei thought Medaka would be easy to eliminate if he gained her trust first. He clarified that he was not a fighter, but an assassin. Before taking down someone powerful, he always preferred to plan his strategy carefully. He also claimed that he never acted without a reason and only carried out his actions when he felt justified. Kei explained that he was currently working, did not want to waste time, had no interest in stopping Medaka's group, disliked conflict, and had no intention of recruiting Medaka. Because of all those reasons, he concluded that he wanted to eliminate her. He then listed a series of absurd justifications, such as the clear weather, a satisfying lunch, a pleasant dream the previous night, his favorite movie about to be released, and even a drained battery. According to Kei, there were countless paths to the same destination, so anything could be used as a reason. He mentioned that Hakama had actually forbidden him from targeting Medaka, yet he still intended to proceed. Medaka then asked her friends to step back because she intended to handle the situation herself. Suddenly, Maguro appeared and firmly restrained Medaka, urging her to rest because she was still injured. Medaka was surprised and instinctively shifted into her battle-ready state before striking Maguro in response. Kaki was stunned to see Medaka facing both a dangerous opponent and someone with questionable behavior at the same time. Realizing that Group 13 had many unusual individuals, Zenkichi quickly informed Kaki that Maguro was Medaka's older brother. He then asked what Maguro was doing there. Maguro explained that an older brother should be wherever his younger sister was. He encouraged Medaka to sit down and rest briefly to speed up her recovery, hoping she would listen to him. Kei asked who would face him and who he was supposed to deal with. Maguro greeted Kei and asked whether Kei still remembered him. Kei admitted that forgetting Maguro was impossible, because Maguro was the one who had taught him how to conceal weapons and had played a major role in shaping his abilities. Maguro stated that Kei was free to use the skills he had given him however he wished. He also admitted that he had always been fascinated by the limits of human capability, and Kei represented one of those extremes. Maguro then asked Zenkichi to face Kei. Zenkichi agreed, but Medaka still insisted on handling Kei alone. Maguro encouraged Medaka to rely on Zenkichi, explaining that men often felt motivated when they had the chance to act bravely in front of others. He reminded Medaka to trust Zenkichi, who had stood by her side for 13 years. Zenkichi prepared himself and took a firm stance to face Kei. Kei believed that Zenkichi must be a good person because he was willing to stand up for a girl. He even thought that he and Zenkichi could have been friends, which was precisely why he wanted to confront him. Zenkichi remained confident that he would survive, no matter how dangerous Kei's attack might be. Zenkichi found himself remembering the past again, even though there was someone he would rather forget. That person was Misogi. He avoided thinking about him because Misogi always brought a sense of heavy negativity. 3 years had passed, and Zenkichi was no longer sure how he truly felt about Misogi. Back then, Medaka had refused to back down. In the end, she had been forced into a physical confrontation and managed to come out on top. But the toll on her was far greater than on her opponent. Before Kei could say anything, Zenkichi made it clear that he had no interest in going through that place, and that all he had left was his sense of dignity. Seeing that Zenkichi was unarmed, Kei handed him a sword. Zenkichi appreciated the gesture, but he explained that he was a gentle and passive person who did not like handling weapons or hurting others. From a distance, Maguro and Medaka watched the situation unfold. Maguro commented that Zenkichi seemed just as stubborn as Medaka. Medaka disagreed, believing that Zenkichi was actually more stubborn than she was. Mokana felt deeply worried about whether Zenkichi would be alright. Kei's actions were clearly beyond what most people would consider reasonable. Despite his calm expression, Kei was someone with very unusual tendencies. Kei moved quickly, directing his sword toward Zenkichi, but Zenkichi deflected the move so skillfully that the sword flew upward and lodged into the ceiling. Kei produced several more weapons, yet Zenkichi handled each situation the same way, causing the weapons to end up stuck overhead. Seeing this, Maguro laughed and described Zenkichi's style as refined and controlled. For Zenkichi, the key was to neutralize every incoming attack as quickly as possible. Medaka wondered why Maguro seemed to be taking Zenkichi's side, as that was unlike him. Maguro explained that if Kei managed to defeat Zenkichi, then Zenkichi would not be worthy of protecting Medaka. To Maguro, this confrontation served as a final test for Zenkichi. Kei then brought out 2 large hammers, confident that such heavy tools would overwhelm Zenkichi. Seiki stepped in and restrained the hammers before they could cause harm. Kei realized that Zenkichi had already understood how heavy the weapons were, which allowed him to block the movements effectively. Zenkichi continued to deflect Kei's attempts calmly. Koki was impressed by Kei's ability to conceal so many weapons, but in his view, Kei still lacked skill in actually using them. Maguro agreed, noting that Kei did not treat his tools as extensions of himself, which made his technique feel unrefined. Medaka wondered if Maguro had intentionally chosen Kei as a test because of his lack of mastery. Maguro denied this and asked her to simply keep watching. Kei switched to a spiked club, convinced that Zenkichi would no longer be able to defend himself. Zenkichi appeared tense and even considered borrowing one of Kei's swords, but Kei refused. Kei swung the weapon toward him, and Zenkichi stopped it with both hands, doing everything he could just to endure the pressure. He then pushed Kei back, causing him to lose his balance. Koki and Mokana felt relieved seeing Zenkichi holding his ground, but Maguro observed that Zenkichi still looked worn out, even though he could have ended the confrontation earlier. Realizing that the previous tools had not worked, Kei produced a handgun. Without hesitation, Zenkichi moved swiftly, redirecting Kei's hand and disabling the weapon in moments. Kei began to notice that Zenkichi did not react to weapons with panic. Zenkichi relied mostly on his legs, striking and creating distance whenever Kei brought out something new. Kei concluded that Zenkichi's effectiveness did not come from fearlessness, but from the fact that he understood fear well enough to handle the situation calmly. Maguro commented that this style suited Zenkichi perfectly because it was practical and relied on simple martial discipline that only required steady training. Koki remarked that in a way, Zenkichi seemed to defy common sense by standing so firmly against an opponent with so many dangerous tools, making him appear unusual as well. Maguro disagreed. In his view, Zenkichi was completely normal, and that normality was exactly what made him remarkable. Zenkichi felt fear, frustration, love, and determination like any ordinary person. He wanted to protect someone in a very human way, and that was what made him admirable. Someone who often felt powerless yet continued to try with persistence, like Zenkichi, had a quiet kind of beauty. Medaka reflected on how Zenkichi had often complained about the trouble she brought into his life, yet he had never left her side for the past 13 years. He stayed with her despite constantly feeling overwhelmed. Long ago, Zenkichi had been an ordinary, helpless boy who needed Medaka to protect him. That was one of the reasons Medaka loved Zenkichi so deeply. Hearing that confession of love, Koki was stunned, and Mokana could barely contain her excitement. At the same time, Kei hurled a grenade toward Zenkichi. Zenkichi reacted instantly, kicking it away so it exploded behind Kei. He told Kei to stop and wondered if he was trying to start a war. Kei then pulled out his final weapon, a rocket launcher. He declared that he wanted to wipe out Zenkichi and everyone else. Seeing this, Zenkichi rushed forward and destroyed the weapon before it could be used. Kei was confused about how Zenkichi managed to avoid triggering the mechanism and the explosive charge. He became increasingly curious about the kind of training Zenkichi had undergone to protect the girl. Mokana looked relieved when Kei finally ran out of weapons. Maguro, on the other hand, commented that Kei had just shed his burden, meaning he would no longer be slowed down. In a flash, Kei moved behind Zenkichi and attempted to take him down, but Zenkichi quickly spun around and kicked him away with force. Watching Kei's defeat, Mokana wondered if it was already time to celebrate Zenkichi's victory. Maguro described it as a normal victory, achieved by an ordinary person. Zenkichi felt a moment of relief as he adjusted his torn uniform. Suddenly, several weapons lodged into his back. Kei had taken advantage of that brief moment of distraction to strike. Zenkichi's body weakened, and he fell to the ground. Seeing him lying there, Medaka broke into tears. Kei wondered if Medaka always cried like that whenever someone died. That reaction made him feel jealous and stirred hostile thoughts toward her. Kalki grew furious and wanted to rush at Kei, but Maguro stopped him, saying that he needed to handle this himself because he felt responsible. Kei asked whether Maguro felt responsible for sending a normal person to face him or for developing the Flash plan back then. Kei believed that if Maguro had not proposed that reckless idea to the principal a year ago, Zankichi might not have ended up in this situation. Suddenly, Zankichi stood back up and scolded Kei for making Medaka cry. Medaka immediately wiped her tears and called out Zankichi's name. Zankichi, now clearly angry, prepared to confront Kei again. Kei remarked that Zankichi was fortunate to still be alive and should not waste that chance. Zankichi found Kei's words strange, as if Kei did not truly want to eliminate him. Kei readied all of his weapons again. Zankichi asked Medaka to give him words of encouragement. As soon as she did, Zankichi stomped his foot hard against the ground. Kei was confident that Zankichi still could not defeat him. However, the powerful stomp shook the area enough to knock loose the weapons that had been lodged in the ceiling earlier, sending them crashing down and disabling Kei's equipment. Zankichi had not expected that the extra effort he put in earlier to plant those weapons would turn out to be useful. Kei was surprised that Zankichi had thought so far ahead. Maguro admitted that Zankichi had truly worked hard. After everything settled, Kalki suggested taking Kei to the police, but Zankichi refused. He explained that Kei was not a killer, but someone who had mastered the art of combat, and yet had chosen not to take his life. Kei admitted that he often felt the strong urge to harm others when he saw them, and because people could be fatally hurt in such situations, he used to label himself as a killer. He intentionally displayed his dangerous weapons so that people would run away from him. In reality, he had never harmed anyone, and that had made his life a lonely one. Kei wanted to have fun and interact with others, but he had never had friends to spend time with. That was why he wanted to join the Flash plan, even though Zankichi had taken a huge risk in trusting him. Zankichi said that he believed in Kei's unusual nature. Kei admitted that no one had ever trusted him before. He then asked Zankichi to be his friend. Zankichi found it odd that Kei would ask that after everything they had just gone through, since they had already fought so hard to survive together. Still, Zankichi accepted and shook Kei's hand. Mokana noticed that the moment looked similar to when she had first joined Medaka. That part of Zankichi's personality was what allowed him to stay by Medaka's side. Meanwhile, Hakama and Hansode were still observing them from their room. Hakama thought Kei should have been fine at that moment, but instead he had gained a friend. That development had never been part of his plan. Hakama began to think that he needed to keep a closer watch on Zankichi, a normal person who could rival those considered abnormal. Perhaps Zankichi was an abnormal disguised as a normal person. Hansode suddenly rejected Hakama's opinion. She firmly stated that Zankichi was an ordinary person. She mentioned that her friend was truly just a very normal guy. Hansode then quietly left, realizing that she herself did not have any friends at all. Zankichi and the others arrived on the third floor of the underground laboratory. They never expected the place to look like a zoo. Medaka was instantly excited and invited Zankichi to walk around and look at the animals. She could hardly wait to see them, since she loved animals so much. She even asked Mokana to come along, but Mokana admitted that she actually disliked animals. Medaka enthusiastically pointed out one adorable animal after another, hoping Mokana might start to like them. When they stopped at the panda enclosure, Mokana commented that the panda's colors bothered her because they reminded her of poorly done makeup. At the koala enclosure, Mokana said she did not like how koalas looked like stuffed dolls and felt unnatural. She also mentioned that the elephant's trunk and the giraffe's long neck made her uncomfortable. Koki and Zankichi were surprised to realize that cute things simply did not suit Mokana's tastes. Medaka and Mokana ended up arguing over something trivial. Mokana then asked Zankichi whether he noticed anything strange. Zankichi pointed out that the animals in the zoo did not seem afraid of Medaka at all, even though animals usually reacted strongly to her presence. Maguro added that this might not be an ordinary zoo. Back when he was still involved in the Flash plan, this facility had not yet existed, which meant the place was likely managed by whoever continued the project afterward. Meanwhile, Kalki was walking around the area and was startled when he suddenly came face to face with a girl whose face was wrapped in bandages. Her name was Yoka. She invited Kalki to talk with her. Kalki already knew Yoka from before. She had once been in the same class as him, but had later been transferred to Class 13. Hearing about Class 13 immediately made Kalki think of Yoka. Seeing the experimental zoo only confirmed his suspicions about her. Yoka asked Kalki to come to an agreement. She requested that Kalki and his friends leave the lab because they were interfering with ongoing research. She also advised them not to spend their lives clashing with others. Koki remarked that Yoka still seemed the same as she had been the previous year. He firmly stated that he and the student council members would continue to face challenges head-on. At that moment, a girl named Itami appeared behind Koki. Koki had been known as a troublemaker since middle school. Everyone knew he ignored rules, damaged property, and intimidated people without hesitation. He was considered beyond the reach of both teachers and authorities. Koki destroyed anything that stood in his way. Back in middle school, the student council president at the time, Misogi, once ordered Koki to target Medaka. Misogi disliked the attention Medaka received as a new student at their school. Koki followed the order and went to Medaka's classroom, confronting her directly. The students panicked when Medaka was left lying on the floor after the incident. After carrying out that order, Koki became widely known as a destroyer. The next day, Koki was shocked to see Medaka return to school as if nothing had happened. He rarely failed when he set out to break someone's spirit. Koki confronted her again, convinced he would finally succeed. Yet Medaka continued to show up at school on time every single day. No matter how many times Koki tried to bring her down, Medaka returned without hesitation. She seemed completely unfazed by his actions. Medaka eventually became known as an unbreakable diamond, even to Koki the Destroyer. As a result, the students stopped fearing Koki since he could not break a single girl. One student took advantage of that shift in fear and gathered others who held grudges against Koki. That student was Zenkichi. He was furious and demanded to know why Koki kept targeting Medaka, who happened to be his childhood friend. Koki could not give a clear reason, which frustrated Zenkichi even more. Zenkichi was about to confront Koki, but Medaka suddenly appeared and forcefully pushed Zenkichi away. She then scolded the students who had gathered there, saying that surrounding and pressuring someone, even if they believed they were right, was still unfair behavior. Medaka believed that Koki once had a gentle heart and compassion for the weak, but after spending his childhood in fear, he had drifted toward a destructive path. She declared that she was willing to endure Koki's destructive impulses until he could rediscover his sense of humanity. However, Medaka was mistaken. Koki's motives were not that simple. He never believed he had made the wrong choices, and there was no particular conviction that pushed him to act the way he did. Koki simply followed the flow of his life and did what he thought he was meant to do. He destroyed things when ordered to because, to him, that was simply his way of living. Misogi, as the former student council president, could not be blamed either, since Koki had willingly chosen that path himself. In the end, Koki chose to kneel before Medaka and asked her to give his life a new purpose. This change of heart caused tension between the new students, Medaka, and Misogi, the former student council president. Itami suddenly appeared and tried to restrain Koki from behind, but Koki reacted quickly and blocked the attempt. Yoka did not expect Koki to be that capable. She then shut the doors around the room, sealing the three of them inside. Yoka calmly introduced herself again, explaining that she was known by the codename Black and White and that she was responsible for supervising the Flask plan. After that, Itami introduced herself to Koki, saying that she was known by the codename Best Pain. It turned out that Itami had been Yoka's childhood friend. In the past, Maguro had been the one in charge of supervising the Flask plan. Yoka explained that the reason she had isolated Koki was because he was a human who had been completely changed by Medaka. Medaka had brought transformation to many people. Zenkichi had not changed, but Yoka had become deeply interested in Koki, the former destroyer. Meanwhile, Zenkichi was trying to break a lock that seemed incredibly strong. Maguro reported that he could not find Koki anywhere. Zenkichi was certain that Koki was trapped behind that door. At the same time, two girls were arguing somewhere nearby. Hearing about this, Mokana and Medaka felt puzzled and wondered why those two girls could not get along as easily as they did. Medaka was also confused about why Zenkichi looked so angry. She was convinced that Koki had been set up. Even if Koki was no longer called the Destroyer, he was still the best. Back in the sealed room, Itami dropped down from the ceiling toward Koki. Koki quickly dodged, but Itami continued her relentless attacks. She was able to strike from both above and below. Itami kept kicking at Koki while he focused only on defending himself without striking back. Koki realized that Itami's abnormal ability might be even greater than Medaka's. Yoka commented that while Shigusa was known as the strongest member of the group of 13, Itami was just as formidable. Itami remarked that even though Koki was known as a judo prince, he would not be able to throw someone who attacked from an upside-down position, let alone defeat her. When Itami aimed a kick toward Koki's face, Koki slid low and pulled Itami down into a grounded position. He calmly stated that he was a wrestler. Earlier, Nekami had once asked why Koki always practiced wrestling techniques when he was supposed to be mastering every move in judo. Koki had explained that he enjoyed wrestling because he did not need to worry about accidentally injuring his opponent. Yoka called Koki kind but foolish. In her view, wrestling was useless if he refused to choke his opponent, and it was harmless only because Kalki expected his opponent to give up on their own. Yoka made it clear that neither she nor Itami would ever surrender to anyone. At that moment, Itami grabbed Kalki with tremendous strength. Yoka then revealed that Itami, with her abnormal abilities, had been modified into something like a mechanical human. Itami's strength was extraordinary, enough to lift Kalki's body off the ground. Koki wondered how she could possibly be that strong. Yoka explained that, as the supervisor of the Flask plan, her role had been to modify the human body from the muscles and bone structure to the nerves, breathing, and even digestion. Yoka had left her mark on Itami's body through those modifications. Filled with energy, Itami leaped back up to the ceiling and prepared herself to continue the fight. Koki calmly readied himself as well. Itami began with a powerful descending kick from the ceiling aimed directly at Kalki. The impact shattered the floor beneath them, causing both of them to fall to the level below. Yoka praised Itami's skill for breaking through the floor while maintaining her balance. That moment reminded her of the first time she met Itami when she was still in middle school. Itami had been one of the students in Class 13 at Hakoniwa High School and a member of the Group of 13, but she had not been born with any abnormal ability. Her height and weight were average, her test scores were always right in the middle of the class rankings, and her physical agility score was far below the national average. Itami had truly been an ordinary girl. She believed that everything in her life was ordinary, including her school uniform, her friends, her lunch breaks, her first love, and even her heartbreak. She concluded that her life achievements were nothing more than average. However, in her third year of middle school, she was transferred to an all-girls school because of her father's job. There, she was forced to reconsider her understanding of her own life after meeting Yoka, who at the time was known as the most mistreated student in the school. The way Yoka had been treated was deeply pitiful. The harsh words thrown at him were, in truth, desperate pleas from frightened victims. That fear allowed him to control the school from the shadows. Itami approached Yoka and asked him to create chaos for her. Yoka admitted that Itami was actually a normal girl, but her strange attraction to abnormal things had made her abnormal as well. Soon after, Kalki and Yoka reached the lower floor. Kalki wondered aloud if the place was an operating room. Yoka explained that basement level 4 was the space where he carried out his modifications. Not long after, Itami appeared before them. The momentum of her body had carried her all the way down to basement level 6. She immediately attacked Kalki, but he easily caught her leg and snapped it. Itami cried out in pain. Yoka called Kalki a calf breaker and asked if Kalki enjoyed wrestling, since that kind of move had long been banned in judo. He realized that Kalki must have been trained by the trickster Nekomi. Yoka criticized Kalki's action as unnecessarily harsh. He wondered why Kalki had not aimed for her joints after hearing that Itami was a mechanical human, especially since Kalki had always been known as a destroyer. Kalki responded that he had changed. In the past, he felt relief after breaking someone down, but now the act only made him feel sick. Kalki then asked Yoka to heal Itami immediately. Yoka said he would not allow Kalki to insult his friend like that. Kalki became confused by those words. Suddenly, Itami appeared behind Kalki and knocked him to the ground, leaving him in pain. Yoka explained that Itami was a mechanical human and only needed about 10 seconds to recover after a broken bone. Kalki was shocked to hear that. Even Medaka possessed extraordinary recovery abilities, yet Itami's case was entirely different. Kalki realized that neither his destructive techniques nor ordinary attacks would be effective against her. Itami asked Yoka if she should continue her assault. Yoka told her it was unnecessary. He concluded that Kalki, a product of Medaka, was no match for Itami, a product of his own work. He described the situation as a disappointing end to the research. Suddenly, Maguro appeared and disrupted the moment in a mischievous way, asking Yoka not to rush to conclusions. In his view, experiments done in haste would only end up as failures. Kalki was surprised to see Maguro there. Seeing Yoka treated that way, Itami immediately kicked Maguro away. Maguro realized that Itami must have been upset by his rude behavior. Kalki asked whether Maguro had come to rescue him. Maguro laughed and said that Kalki's friends trusted him so much that they had left him behind and continued down to basement level 4. At the time, Maguro had split off to explore the floor and happened to run into them there. Kalki felt that although his friends trusted him, it still sounded cruel to be left on his own like that. Yoka doubted that Maguro's arrival was purely by chance. He believed Maguro must have grown curious after seeing the strange creatures on basement level 3 and wanted to learn about Yoka, who had replaced him. That curiosity likely brought Maguro there alone. Maguro tied his hair back and claimed that Yoka had misunderstood him. He jokingly described himself as someone drawn to trouble wherever it appeared. Yoka replied dryly that trouble seemed to appear everywhere anyway. Maguro openly admitted that he was a shameless pervert who would show up anywhere girls happened to be. Koki told him that Yoka and Itami were not ordinary girls. Maguro only smiled and said he was not an ordinary pervert either. He did not care whether the girls were normal or not, because he claimed he would take 4 things from every girl he met: their attention, their undergarments, and their hearts. He introduced himself as the self-proclaimed pervert who served as the caretaker of the school's old building. Itami quietly asked Yoka what they should do, because Maguro was honestly disgusting. Yoka replied that she felt oddly honored to meet him, but she had not expected him to speak of Medaka in such a strange way. Maguro did not deny it, but he clarified that his words were being misunderstood. He explained that he viewed all girls on the planet as his little sisters, and even considered boys from grade school as younger brothers. Suddenly, Yoka casually remarked that she did not wear a bra because she found it troublesome, joking that she simply relied on her hands for support. Maguro nearly fainted from shock at her comment. Yoka realized that Maguro had once been her predecessor as a flask plan supervisor, and the one category she could never surpass him in was age. Maguro commented that Yoka seemed to have become a very reliable supervisor. Maguro said he wanted to see just how capable Yoka really was. If she turned out to be inferior to him, she would have to prove her earlier statement. Without hesitation, Yoka accepted the challenge. If Maguro proved superior, she would have to demonstrate that she truly meant what she said. Maguro suggested starting the contest, but unexpectedly asked Koki to take part instead. Koki wondered why Maguro himself was not participating. Maguro calmly explained that physical activity was not his specialty. Without warning, Itami rushed at Koki. She was determined to defeat him in this match. She quickly locked her legs around Koki's head, choosing a grappling technique to overpower him. Koki was surprised to realize that Itami understood advanced holds, something he had never expected from her energetic personality. Yoka commented that once Itami wrapped her legs around Koki's neck, he would lose consciousness in seconds. Maguro watched in amazement at Yoka's confidence. At one point, Maguro awkwardly began removing his trousers out of embarrassment, believing he had misunderstood the rules. Itami scolded him, pointing out that he had gotten the rules completely wrong. Her distraction caused her to loosen her hold on Koki. Koki took advantage of the moment, noting that Maguro had successfully drawn attention in an inappropriate way. He swiftly shifted into a counterhold, applying pressure to Itami's arm and torso. Yoka was impressed by Koki's skill. Itami cried out in pain as Koki maintained the hold. Yoka hoped that the sound she heard was not a joint being forced too far. Koki mentioned that natural healing could not fix certain types of injuries instantly, and although he did not like hurting her, he had little choice. Yoka was surprised to see that Koki seemed worried about an opponent he had just overpowered, and she quietly remarked that he was kind. Maguro pointed out that Yoka should probably show more concern for Itami instead, since Itami was her friend. Yoka simply laughed. To everyone's surprise, Itami stood up again moments later as if nothing had happened. Koki could hardly believe how quickly she had recovered. Yoka explained that she never worried about Itami because she knew just how incredibly tough her friend was. Maguro speculated that Yoka must have pushed Itami's body far beyond normal limits before, almost as if treating her like a durable practice dummy. Unexpectedly, Yoka removed her skirt to provoke Maguro further. Koki was startled, and even Itami questioned why Yoka had started with her skirt. Yoka calmly stated that age was the only category in which Maguro surpassed her. Seeing this, Koki realized that Yoka was far more competitive than she appeared. She acted indifferent, but her rivalry with Maguro clearly went deeper than just the matter of being his successor. Maguro joked that Yoka's words had awakened the masochistic side he thought he had left behind. He teased her for provoking someone who had already retired. Maguro then told Koki that since he seemed capable of choosing between causing damage and holding back, he would leave that choice entirely in Koki's hands. At that moment, Yoka immediately ordered Itami to attack Koki again. Itami rushed forward and shoved him. Koki was confident he would not lose, but he was surprised by how strong and resilient Itami's limbs were and how quickly she recovered each time. Koki found Maguro's earlier advice confusing. He was also distracted by Itami's loud reactions whenever he forced her into another hold. He realized that, as someone with unusual physical traits, Itami should have been able to ignore pain signals if she wanted to. Pain existed as a warning system for living organisms, but for someone with such rapid recovery, it only seemed like an unnecessary distraction. Koki began to wonder if there was a reason Itami was still allowing herself to feel it. Koki then applied a 4-direction horizontal hold on Itami, a combined technique of grappling and locking known as a clamp. Itami doubted that Koki could break free using that method. Koki explained that the goal was never to overpower Itami, but to wear her down. When Itami cried out loudly, Koki became even more certain that his analysis was correct. The modifications made to Itami's body consumed energy at a much faster rate, which was why her pain receptors were left active, or possibly even heightened, to signal when her energy was running low. According to Kalki, Itami's true weakness was exhaustion. He compared her not to a Kamen Rider, but to an Ultraman, someone who could only function at peak strength for a very limited time. That was why Kalki chose to defeat her with a clamp, rather than with complex grappling and locking techniques that might allow her to endure longer. The extraordinary strength in Itami's arms and legs became useless against the four-direction horizontal hold, which was specifically designed to counter that kind of power. At that moment, Yoka realized that Itami was highly inefficient, capable of using her full strength for only about 3 minutes. That limitation was the reason Shigusa considered her weak. Yoka could not understand how Kalki managed to deduce that simply from observing Itami's broken arm. Maguro remarked that hiding a weakness from someone perceptive was always a mistake. Yoka started to remove her outer garment, but Maguro stopped her, saying that he was more interested in what was hidden behind the bandages on her face. Itami asked Yoka not to do it, and not to worry about her, because she only cared about her friend's safety. Slowly, Yoka began unwrapping the bandages from her face. She admitted that she felt happy hearing Itami speak to her at a time when everyone else avoided her. Maguro commented that it seemed as if the real match had only just begun. Everyone was stunned when they saw Yoka's face. Even Itami had never seen it before. Koki was surprised as well, remembering that Yoka had never once shown her face during 11th grade. Yoka disliked showing her face because people would stare at her, and she felt that the attention was overwhelming and embarrassing. From what she had seen before, Itami had already guessed the truth. Yoka's face was undeniably beautiful, and Itami wondered why she would hide it. Koki was surprised by how eager Maguro seemed to be for Yoka to remove the bandages. For a moment, Yoka reminded Koki of someone else. Maguro then looked at Yoka and calmly told her to put her skirt back on, reminding her that she should dress comfortably. Yoka was confused, since Maguro had been the one encouraging her to remove it earlier. She remarked that if Maguro wanted her to put it back on, then he should also fix his own clothing. Koki was surprised that Maguro actually listened to Yoka's words, as he had expected Maguro to continue provoking her. Koki became convinced that there was something unusual about Yoka's face. Yoka wondered why Maguro had stepped back. She suspected that he might be the type of person who felt dissatisfied after winning a game, someone who cared more about the process than the outcome. She then asked Koki to release Itami. Yoka admitted her defeat and offered to hand over the data for the flask plan. Koki immediately let Itami go, and Itami quickly apologized to Yoka. Yoka did not hold it against her. Yoka then asked Koki and Maguro to find their friends and move to the next floor. Maguro suspected that Yoka was about to run away and hinted that he knew her real name. Yoka was visibly startled by that remark. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor, Medaka, Mokana, and Zenkichi were looking around the room. Medaka wondered where Maguro was at that moment. When Mokana asked about Yoka, Maguro's expression suddenly turned pale. Medaka knew that Yoka had once been in 11th grade before suddenly transferring to 13th grade. Mokana suspected that unusual people like Yoka might be involved in the flask plan. Medaka admitted that she did not know much about Yoka, but she felt that her older brother's ideas often seemed unreasonable. Mokana believed that it could not be easy for Medaka to have an overprotective older brother like Maguro. Momomichi and Satsu were like older brothers to Mokana, but they were not as extreme as Maguro. Medaka acknowledged that Maguro could indeed be troublesome, as he poured all his affection into his 2 younger sisters. The Kurakami family was known as one of the most powerful families in Japan, and its children were well known. Medaka had shown signs of brilliance from a young age. Maguro was widely recognized for his intense devotion to his younger sister. However, not many people knew about the second child of the Kurakami family, Kujira, who at that time went by the name Yoka. It was not because she lacked remarkable traits like Maguro and Medaka. In fact, she diverged from them in a very different way, as shown by her experiments in studying the human body. In the field of biology, Yoka even surpassed Medaka. Zenkichi himself did not know much about Yoka because she chose to avoid contact with other people. She never attended school and rarely left the house. She spent most of her time sitting at her desk. Yoka's most unusual trait was her level of self-control. She deliberately distanced herself from anything enjoyable and from anything that could bring happiness into her life. For Yoka, having fun meant taking it easy, feeling happy meant doing nothing, and laughing also meant doing nothing. She kept her food intake to the bare minimum and drank only plain water. She did not play games because all her time was spent studying, and she slept only 3 hours a day. Yoka's lifestyle went far beyond simple frugality and turned into a form of self-denial. Her favorite saying was that the greatest things only come from hell, and she followed that belief like a personal creed. To her, being born with wealth, talent, and privilege had no value at all, because she felt that her own good fortune had only brought harm to herself. Yuka believed that nothing meaningful could come from happiness. She thought that in order to live properly, she had to make her life more painful and experience something like hell. In her view, her luck and talent would only end up eating away at her soul. Medaka respected Yuka for her endurance, while Maguro loved both of his younger sisters equally. However, Yuka felt that their love was unnecessary. On her 11th birthday, Yuka left home for the first time and never returned. She left behind a message saying that she would rather be gone than live a happy life. It had been 6 years since Maguro last saw his younger sister. He explained that Medaka chose to respect Yuka's wishes, but he himself searched everywhere for her. During that time, Maguro came to understand his own abnormality and eventually joined the Kurokami group. He shared that he came to Hakoniwa Academy and took part in the Flask Plan project because he hoped it would help him find Yuka. To him, the laboratory was the best source of information about people with abnormal abilities. In truth, Maguro never really cared about the limits of humanity. His only concern had always been his younger sisters. Maguro was completely shocked to discover that Yuka was now a new 11th grade student. Kalki was just as surprised when he heard this. Maguro wondered if Kalki thought he was strange for making inappropriate requests of others, even involving his own sister, but Kalki said he did not see him that way. Itami realized that Maguro showed no interest in her while he was bothering Yuka. Maguro then admitted that he had not been honest when he claimed to see every girl as a younger sister. The only sisters he truly had were Medaka and Kujira, who at that time was known as Yuka. He confessed that he had been thinking about the two of them constantly for the past 6 years. Maguro asked Yuka to turn around and show her gentle face, because he believed she still had the ability to be happy. Yuka was deeply moved and hugged Maguro tightly, and he returned the embrace. Unexpectedly, Yuka injected a substance into Maguro's body. She explained that she had removed those painful memories from herself and considered her life to have begun 6 years ago. Since then, she had lived in a way that felt like hell, with no room for happiness, just as she wanted. She insisted that she did not need a family. Maguro felt confused about what Yuka had injected into him, as he found himself unable to move and his vision became blurry. Yuka firmly stated that she did not need anyone to give her happiness. She admitted that seeing Maguro made her uncomfortable to the point that she wanted to hide her face. Koki asked what Yuka had injected into Maguro, but she refused to answer. Yuka claimed that removing Maguro from her life would only make her even more unhappy, and from that state she believed she could create even greater abnormal individuals. However, she changed her mind and decided to continue with the Flask Plan. Suddenly, Medaka broke through the wall and entered the room after hearing someone mention the beautiful name Kurokami Kujira. When she saw Yuka standing there, Medaka addressed her as her older sister. Medaka ran into Yuka and addressed her as an older sister. Kalki quickly warned Medaka to be careful, explaining that Yuka had erased her own memories. She was no longer Kujira, Medaka's sister, but now a member of Group 13. Medaka asked Yuka if what Kalki said was true. Yuka admitted that she had wiped away every memory tied to both her past pain and her past happiness. She made it clear that she was no longer Medaka's sister and had become Medaka's enemy. When Yuka tried to inject a liquid into Medaka's body, Medaka reacted instantly, blocking the move and taking the syringe away. Medaka calmly stated that she did not mind calling Yuka both her sister and her enemy at the same time. She then asked what kind of substance had been inside the syringe. Yuka explained that it was not poison, but a medicine. It was a normalization agent developed by people who considered abnormal abilities to be a disease. The vaccine was designed to erase abnormalities and had originally been created by Maguro. This liquid was part of the Flask Plan. However, it was still considered an incomplete experiment because it could not remove the severe pain caused as a side effect. Yuka had no intention of fixing that flaw, since she believed the pain itself was necessary for reform. She felt certain that its creator would be pleased to become a test subject for his own invention. Yuka admitted that she felt relieved not remembering her past, even though, without realizing it, she had once turned her own older brother into a tragic test subject. In her mind, that made her current self seem much better than who she used to be. Kalki was shocked because it was the first time he had ever seen Yuka smile, and the expression felt unsettling. Medaka had always respected her older sister deeply, and the Yuka she remembered had never brought misfortune to others. Medaka asked Yuka to give her the antidote. Yuka agreed, but only if Medaka was willing to become her test subject. Without hesitation, Medaka injected the vaccine into her own body. The effect was immediate and extremely painful, causing her to collapse to the floor. Yuka then asked Itami to take them to the next floor. Koki protested, reminding her that their agreement was supposed to include giving Medaka the antidote. Yuka refused. Koki urged Itami to stop Yoka's reckless behavior if she truly considered herself Yoka's friend. Itami did consider Yoka a friend, but in her view, friendship meant more than sharing fun moments. A true friend also shared suffering. Even though Itami was clearly uneasy with Yoka's actions, she remained by her side. She moved toward Koki aggressively, but Medaka blocked her. Medaka stood up again and explained that the normalization liquid was working quickly. Her body felt heavier and her thoughts slower, which meant the experiment could be considered a success. Yoka was confused about how Medaka could still move normally. Medaka explained that she simply needed to keep moving normally because she was no longer abnormal. She pushed Itami away with her hand, sending her backward. Medaka added that she had been trained differently. She believed that if Yoka erased Magoro's abnormality, he would simply become an ordinary person with questionable habits. Medaka was not bothered by the possibility of losing her own abnormality, even though it hurt. Yoka admitted that she and Itami had lost to Medaka and finally handed over the antidote. Koki urged Medaka not to accept it. Yoka tossed it toward Medaka, and Medaka stated that she trusted her. Koki warned Medaka not to trust Yoka so easily. Medaka understood the warning, but she insisted that no matter how many times Yoka had deceived her, she could never doubt the words of someone she loved. Not long after, Medaka collapsed again. Koki questioned why she would go that far and wondered if Yoka had heard what Medaka had said. Yoka commented that Medaka was foolish for continuing to trust her after being tricked. Magoro then asked what kind of medicine Yoka had actually given Medaka. Yoka revealed that it was simply a common medication normally used to treat heart conditions. Medaka stood up again, but this time she had lost her memory. Yoka was delighted, revealing that she had modified the medicine into a memory-erasing drug. It was a degraded version of the drug she had used 6 years earlier. With it, she had successfully taken away Medaka's abnormality, her memories, and her emotions. Koki shook Medaka's body, trying to bring her back to her senses. Medaka still recognized Koki, but she called him Tashima. Itami prepared herself for a fight. Medaka did not understand the situation, but she felt as if she was expected to fight. Koki realized that memory and personality might be separate things. Even if Medaka had lost her memories, she could still be the same person inside. However, Magoro pointed out that if Koki's assumption were true, Medaka would have no reason to fight unless she had forgotten the 15 years she had lived as Medaka. No one expected Itami to come out on top in that intense clash and defeat Medaka. Seeing Medaka completely powerless, Yoka told Itami to finish things. Koki could not help thinking that everything might change if Yoka were willing to restore Medaka's abnormality and her memories. Hearing that, Yoka only laughed. In his view, Medaka's memories might help, but her abnormality had most likely already returned on its own. Yoka explained that the drug he had developed was still far from perfect. Even with her abnormality, Medaka had still lost to Itami, who kept moving forward with an empty state of mind. Most people, he said, were dazzled by abnormal abilities, when they should have paid more attention to the personality that supported those abilities. Magoro pleaded with Yoka to let Medaka go, but Yoka refused. His experiment was still ongoing, and he wanted to run one more test. He believed they would discover something new by placing a different personality inside Medaka's body. Magoro objected strongly, saying that this went far beyond simply erasing someone's memory. Yoka responded that he had the perfect subject for this idea, Odo, the leader who lived on floor B13. Without wasting another second, Itami pulled Yoka away and carried Medaka toward the next floor. Magoro could do nothing but watch. Koki urged him to find Zenkichi and Mokana, so they could head to floor B13 together. Magoro felt weighed down by guilt because, once again, he had failed to protect his younger sisters. When they reached floor B13, Yoka prepared to inject Medaka with another dose to make sure her memories would not return. Itami warned him to be careful, reminding him how close things had come to going wrong earlier. Yoka remained confident that Odo would support his experiment, especially since Odo had once expressed a desire to make Medaka his wife. Itami looked increasingly nervous, convinced that the student council would arrive at any moment. He also wondered why Yoka had started covering his face with bandages again. Not long after, several others arrived and offered their help to Yoka. Gunki stepped forward willingly, saying that helping a friend like this was an honor. The others included Otomaya, known by the codename Free World, Hamaya with the codename Love, Yutori with Trick or Treatment, Yamane with Star Master, and Shoko with Dental Shoes. Yoka was surprised that they showed interest in the chaos. From his perspective, their involvement would buy him even more time. Elsewhere, Zenkichi suggested that they escape from the laboratory. Koki grew frustrated hearing that. Zenkichi clarified that he was only trying to prioritize what mattered most. Koki felt disappointed, but Zenkichi urged him to be realistic. He believed it was impossible to risk everything just to rescue Medaka. Zenkichi reminded him that they were members of the student council, and their responsibility was to support every student at Hakoniwa Academy. Before long, Muri arrived with several others. She seemed surprised that Zenkichi had not thought about asking for help. When Zenkichi asked why they had come to the laboratory, Muri explained that she had brought Harigane, Nekami, Miyoka, Shigusa, and Kei because it looked like the student council needed support. They were people who had once been defeated by the student council and had now chosen to stand beside them as allies. Zenkichi could hardly believe what he was seeing. Muri confidently said that she and her friends were not the type to give up. Harigane mentioned hearing about the student council's difficulties. Nekami explained that Hansode had told them what was happening. Harigane added that news of the student council's defeat had spread through social media. Muri then stated that, as a member of the disciplinary committee, it was her duty to clean up this mess and protect the peace of the school. Zenkichi and Kauki found this ironic, considering that Medaka had become involved in the Flask plan because of the chaos that Muri had helped create in the first place. Shigusa had already made plans to hang out with Medaka the next day, so if Medaka was in trouble, he felt obligated to help save her. Kei promised to contribute however he could. Mokana could not understand how they had switched sides so quickly. Miyoka continued speaking in strings of numbers, but everyone assumed he meant well. At one point, Muri told Miyoka to stop making awkward comments. Zenkichi quietly noted that the most unpredictable people there might end up being the ones to fight, especially since nearly everyone present was already injured. Muri laughed and said that if Zenkichi was trying to avoid getting hurt, then he should step aside. She declared that she was more than willing to take his place in destroying the Flask plan and rescuing Medaka. Zenkichi never meant it that way. He was only worried that Muri would end up hurting herself even more. Muri felt confused, thinking Zenkichi should not have to worry about them at all. Zenkichi believed that if Medaka ever found out that someone had been hurt because of her, she would cry. He began to cry as well and said that he never wanted to see Medaka cry again. Suddenly, Nekami informed them that there was an elevator on the first floor that went straight down to B13, so they would not have to waste much time getting there. Meanwhile, on B13, Medaka, completely powerless, stood in front of Udo. Udo finally understood that it was Medaka's personality that made her abnormal. Yoka had told Mizo that Medaka became truly weak when her heart was empty. The real question then was what would happen if a different kind of heart were placed inside her. Udo planned to give Medaka a cruel heart as an engagement gift for his future wife. Mizo immediately left to carry out his task. Udo reminded him to make sure Yoka would not see his face. Mizo explained that the bandages on Yoka's face were meant to hide, while the mask on his own face was meant to deceive. Back at the elevator, Zenkichi and the others were waiting, only to realize that their enemies were already inside it. Hunki had anticipated this. He was certain that someone who relied on trickery would choose the elevator that went directly to B13. Gunki questioned Kei and Shigusa about why they had betrayed them. It turned out that the two of them had never really considered themselves part of the Group 13 alliance. Muri asked Zenkichi to go to B13 using the stairs. Zenkichi refused because he did not want to leave the others behind. Muri insisted that this was no longer about the Flask plan. At that moment, their goal was simply to survive. She admitted, even though she hated to say it, that they truly needed Medaka to get through this. Zenkichi had to go and bring Medaka back. Zenkichi, Kauki, Mokana, and Magoro immediately ran toward the stairwell. Hunki then told Muri and the others that he and his team were far stronger and more frightening than they could imagine. He even suggested that they abandon all logic and reason. Muri calmly replied that none of them had ever been known for being reasonable in the first place. Without wasting time, Yutori swung her long hair forward, wrapping it around Muri and the others. Shigusa tried to strike her, but Yutori blocked the attack using her hair. Shigusa realized she needed to distract Yutori, even if only for a moment. Kei then used his sword to cut through Yutori's hair, instantly freeing everyone from the restraint. He said that he would do anything to help his friends. Kei quickly began firing his gun at their opponents, but to his surprise, all the bullets were stopped by Soko. Miyoka arrived, swinging an iron ball, but Yamami intercepted it and heated it up. Soon after, Harigane rushed in to attack, but her strike passed right through Otome's body. Nekami laughed as she watched the chaotic fight unfold. Muri wondered why Nekami was not joining the battle. Nekami admitted that she wanted to, but two enemies were still standing behind her, which meant she could not move. Muri pointed out that Gunki and Hamaya were on a completely different level. Nekami replied that they should be able to break this stalemate because she believed Zenkichi had more than enough time to rescue Medaka. Muri then sensed that someone was blocking the path to the lower floor. At that moment, Zenkichi and the others had reached B12. The area looked like some kind of game arena. They searched for the stairs leading down to B13 when Mizo suddenly appeared and called out to Zenkichi. Mizo introduced himself as the Class 13 Rabbit Labyrinth. Zenkichi felt confused. Just the day before, Mizo had helped him, but now he was trying to stop him. Mizo explained that Medaka's mind would be fully reprogrammed in 15 minutes. He said he would allow them to pass only after that time had elapsed. Mokana, frustrated, asked whether Mizo really enjoyed tormenting a girl and whether the flask plan was truly that important to him. Mizo admitted that he did not care about the flask plan at all. The only thing he cared about was Odo. To him, Odo was the most remarkable person in the world. When Medaka appeared, she became nothing more than a comparison to measure Odo's greatness. Mizo declared that he would not allow Zenkichi and the others to interfere with his plan. Not long after, Zenkichi and the others fell asleep after inhaling a sleeping gas. Only Mokana remained conscious. As a skilled swimmer, she was able to hold her breath for a long time. Previously, Medaka asked Mokana to become the student council treasurer. After accepting the offer, she left the swim team and joined the student council. Still, she could not understand why someone as seemingly perfect as Medaka would need her help. Mokana was surprised to discover that Medaka lacked a lot of basic general knowledge that most people picked up from books. She even wondered how Medaka had managed to live her life without knowing such common things. Medaka quickly understood anything once Mokana explained it, yet Mokana often felt like she had failed to explain everything clearly. Medaka had never even heard of an amusement park before. One Sunday, Mokana gathered her courage and invited Medaka to visit an amusement park. Her suspicions were confirmed. Upon arriving there, Medaka showed pure joy while trying the rides with Mokana. In that moment, Mokana realized that Medaka was simply an ordinary 15-year-old girl at heart. At another time, when everyone else fell asleep after inhaling a sleeping gas, Mokana remained awake because, as a professional swimmer, she had strong lung capacity and could hold her breath for a long time. She did not know anything about Flask's plan, but she could not tolerate the actions of those who had ruined a young girl's life. Mizo sensed that the situation had become serious. He actually did not want to fight Mokana. He questioned whether Mokana truly believed Medaka was just an ordinary girl and mocked the idea of calling someone so extraordinary a normal person. Mokana, filled with anger, let out a powerful scream that knocked Mizo back. She refused to let him insult her friend. Moments later, Mizo's body grew unsteady as he accidentally inhaled some of the sleeping gas, and he began to feel overwhelmingly drowsy. He pointed out that while Mokana's lung capacity could be used as an advantage, she still needed to breathe whenever she spoke, especially when she screamed. Suddenly, Mokana forced herself to stay awake again by digging her nails into her own skin. Mizo was shocked by what she did. He grew more curious about why Mokana was trying so hard, considering that she and Medaka had only met recently. He even assumed that Mokana must have once been Medaka's enemy. He could not understand why she was willing to push herself so far for Medaka's sake. Mokana believed that relationships were defined by the bonds she chose to build, not by past labels like friend or enemy. She valued the connection she formed in the present. Mizo realized that Mokana was being completely sincere and that she was not an opponent he could simply ignore. He knew he would be in trouble if he did not end the fight quickly before Mokana figured out the weakness behind his abnormal ability. Mokana admitted that she was more of a competitor than a fighter, but she was willing to struggle for her friend. She screamed as loudly as she could, and the sound caused the glass around them to shatter. Mizo suggested that she stop pushing herself and take a deep breath. He was certain that Mokana had already realized his abnormality allowed him to read other people's thoughts, meaning he would always know what she planned to do. Mizo believed that friendship could only exist between equals. Because of that, he claimed that Mokana, who was in the 11th grade, could never truly be friends with Medaka, who was in the 13th grade. He insisted that Medaka was in serious condition and that Mokana did not meet the requirements to save her, worry about her, or be close to her. Mizo admitted that he was close to Odo, yet he had never considered Odo a friend. In his view, a king was meant to stand alone. Mokana, on the other hand, thought about Zenkichi, who wanted to become someone capable of protecting Medaka, and Koki, who dedicated himself to helping Medaka out of gratitude. She admired their feelings, but she believed that, in the end, they were simply giving Medaka special attention. Mizo questioned why it was wrong to give special attention to someone extraordinary. Once again, Mokana forced herself to stay alert by pressing her nails into her skin, which made Mizo uneasy. Mokana believed that all the special attention Medaka received only made her feel lonelier. She felt that everyone was foolish for focusing only on how amazing Medaka was without trying to understand how she truly felt. Mizo was confused by how Mokana spoke as if she understood Medaka so well. Mokana did not need to read Medaka's thoughts. She believed she understood Medaka, simply because they were friends and because Medaka had personally asked for her help. Mokana felt confident that she could defeat Mizo and save Medaka. After that, she hoped to take everyone to the amusement park together. Mizo was reminded of his childhood. Being surrounded by crowds had always given him headaches because his mind-reading ability never stopped working. One day, while he was at a game center, Odo approached him and asked him to say what Odo was thinking at that moment. Mizo had been deeply amazed by Odo. He felt as if he had been born to meet Odo and that his ability existed so he could truly understand him. Mokana urged Mizo to give up right away because she already had a plan to defeat him. She was convinced that Mizo's abnormal ability had a fatal weakness. Mizo calmly stated that he could read what Mokana was planning and said her efforts were pointless. Mokana did not expect that her attempt to provoke him would backfire. She realized that no one seemed able to match Mizo. She considered acting randomly instead of overthinking her next move, even though she was unsure whether she could control her own movements. Fear filled her, and she wanted to run, but she knew she had to continue for the sake of her friends because she was the student council treasurer. Without thinking any further, Mokana took a deep breath. Even Mizo seemed confused about what she was about to do. Suddenly, Mizo let out a loud cry, causing glass around the area to fall and scatter. His clothes were torn and he appeared to be in pain. At that moment, Mokana recalled her earlier suspicion when Mizo claimed he could read other people's thoughts. She remembered how surprised he looked every time she hurt her own fingernails. That was when she realized that Mizo was also feeling the pain she felt. She understood that he had been holding it in this whole time. It was not just physical pain. Mokana realized that Mizo could also sense her anger and even her drowsiness. She began to suspect that the sleeping gas had been Mizo's only trick to stop her and the others. She believed Mizo had been trying every possible way to make her lose the will to fight because he did not truly know how to harm or confront her directly. Mokana said that Mizo acted as if he were the key figure of the group of 13, when in reality he might have been the kindest member of them all. Because he could feel other people's sadness and pain, she believed that made him one of the kindest people in the world. She pleaded with Mizo to understand her feelings so she could save Medaka. Mizo then realized the weakness in his abnormal ability. He could always tell when someone was being sincere, honest, and truly serious. He could not resist when Mokana spoke without pretending. His weakness was being influenced by the emotions of others. Just as he was about to accept Mokana's outstretched hand, Odo suddenly arrived and stopped him. Odo questioned why Mizo allowed himself to be swayed by Mokana. He described Mizo as being like the wind, always changing direction. Odo told him not to pay attention to tears, friendship, or suffering, and insisted that Mizo should only draw inspiration from his strength alone. Mokana immediately recognized the man standing before her as Odo. She wondered why he was there when he was supposed to be on floor B13. In an instant, Mizo shifted his stance and sided with Odo. Odo warned Mizo not to let anyone see his true nature. Mizo apologized and asked whether Odo had already finished reconditioning Medaka's mind on floor B13. Odo explained that the process was complete and that he had come to pick up Mizo because of his mind-reading ability. Meanwhile, Yoka and Itami were near Medaka, waiting for her to regain consciousness after the experiment she had gone through with Odo. Yoka encouraged Medaka to stay calm and rest, but Medaka insisted on going to meet someone right away. At the same time, Mokana was shocked to learn that Medaka's mind had been manipulated. She believed Odo and Mizo had lied to her and called Odo a great deceiver. Seeing how angry Mokana was, Odo mockingly wondered whether she intended to attack him. Using his power, he forced Mokana down onto her knees. The machines around the room reacted to Odo's ability, making Mokana realize just how powerful he was, just as Medaka and Zenkichi had described. Odo seemed pleased to see Mokana subdued, but it was still not enough to satisfy him after she had tried to influence Mizo earlier. He prepared to use the debris around them to strike her. Odo told Mizo to step back so he would not feel the impact of the pain Mokana was about to experience, though he assured him that he did not intend to kill her. Odo planned to announce his marriage to Medaka in front of her friends. Just as Odo was about to act, Zenkichi suddenly rose again and came to Mokana's aid. Odo wondered out loud whether his extraordinary presence had ruined Zenkichi's peaceful sleep. Zenkichi admitted that he was not the only one still awake. Koki suddenly appeared and immediately grabbed Odo by the neck. He understood that Odo's abnormal ability allowed him to manipulate gravity, but he believed that if he restrained Odo and combined his own body weight with Odo's, that ability would become useless. Odo smiled and said that Koki's guess was impressive, but still incorrect. With ease, he used his power to push Koki away. It became clear that Odo's abilities included hypnosis, telekinesis, and gravity manipulation. He was confident that no one could surpass his abnormality. Zenkichi, however, believed that he could defeat Odo, and would not fall as easily as Mokana and Kalki had. Not long after, Odo forced Zenkichi's hands to tighten around Mokana's neck. Zenkichi did not even realize when the muscles in his body began moving on their own. Mokana was confused as well, unable to break free from Zenkichi's grip. She had never expected him to exert that much strength. Odo explained that his abnormality was not something that could simply be overcome. He mentioned that Maguro should have known better how his power worked. From behind a wall, Maguro responded that he was not the kind of person who revealed a friend's secrets. Hearing that, Odo laughed and commented that Maguro was honorable in some ways, yet cunning enough to let his friends struggle while he stayed hidden. According to Odo, Maguro preferred waiting in the shadows for an opening rather than helping directly. He wondered why Maguro did not simply explain his abnormality to the others. Maguro finally stated that Odo's ability was the opposite of Mizo's. If Mizo's power allowed him to read minds, then Odo's allowed him to control them. Zenkichi and the others were shocked to hear this. Odo explained that his power released EMP-like waves that stimulated motor nerves. Mizo's abnormality allowed him to receive, while Odo's allowed him to send. That was why Odo could manipulate both people and machines. He claimed to be the ultimate ruler, saying that other people's bodies would obey his commands more than their own will. Zenkichi struggled desperately to pull his hands away from Mokana. He did not care who Odo was, but in his view, Odo had no right to tamper with Medaka's mind. Odo was surprised that Zenkichi managed to break free from his control, while his attention was momentarily distracted. Odo asked if Zenkichi was upset because he had altered Medaka's mind. Zenkichi admitted that he was. It was not only about Medaka, but also about the belief that no human had the right to control another person's mind. He questioned whether Odo enjoyed having people completely under his command. In Zenkichi's eyes, if Medaka's mind were changed, then she would no longer be Medaka. Odo seemed impressed by Zenkichi's thoughts and remarked that Zenkichi might not be so different from him. He wondered whether Zenkichi had ever hoped that Medaka would change herself. He questioned whether Zenkichi ever felt that Medaka wasted time fighting Shikusa, or when she cried during her fight with Kei, or when she fell for Yoka's trick. Odo pushed further, asking if Zenkichi had ever wished that Medaka would stop acting so rigidly idealistic and instead become a more ordinary girl. Zenkichi admitted that Medaka often treated him and their friends with overwhelming concern. He had hoped she would ease up on that, but that did not mean he would allow Odo to interfere with her mind. Hearing this, Mizo laughed and pointed out that Zenkichi had once refused to join the student council and could only complain back then. Mizo wondered when Zenkichi had become so devoted to Medaka. He even suggested that Medaka had influenced Zenkichi just as strongly. According to Mizo, Medaka and Odo were not so different when it came to influencing others. Odo controlled minds, while Medaka shaped people's behavior. Zenkichi insisted that Medaka was still right, perhaps even too right for her own good. Odo replied that Zenkichi sounded arrogant for believing that anything considered right must automatically be accepted. Soon after, Medaka arrived and admitted that she had been wrong for acting overly self-righteous. She stated that the new version of herself had been revised. Zenkichi was shocked when Medaka showed up. She explained that she was a revised version of Medaka. Odo scolded Yoka for not staying downstairs as instructed. Yoka clarified that Medaka had insisted on coming up, and she had not been able to stop her. Medaka then stated that she was no longer the Medaka her friends once knew, because the previous version of herself no longer existed. Zenkichi grew frustrated and demanded to know what Odo had done to her. Odo claimed that he had brainwashed Medaka, but she denied it. She explained that she had not been brainwashed at all, but had instead come to a realization after 13 years, waking up from what she described as a long nightmare, in which she believed she had been born solely to help others. Odo's original plan had been to reshape Medaka into the kind of girl he desired. However, that plan failed because Medaka's heart was like a sealed egg within her, quietly waiting for the right moment to hatch. Suddenly, Medaka announced that the student council would cooperate with the Flask plan, and that she would join Group 13 to help ensure its success. Zenkichi was furious and demanded to know what she meant. Medaka explained that she was now acting rationally, while her former self had simply been playing around. She believed that she had been born to perfect herself, and that her mission was to fully realize her own extraordinary nature and greatness. She intended to use the Flask plan to achieve that goal. Since the Flask plan aimed to create a perfect human being, Medaka decided to use it for her own personal purpose. In that moment, it felt as if she had returned to a state where her abnormal nature fully controlled her. Zenkichi pleaded with her to speak like the Medaka he knew. Kalki reminded everyone that the Flask plan was a dangerous project that could put every student in the school at risk. Medaka, however, believed that the students of Hakoniwa Academy should feel honored to contribute to their student council president's pursuit of perfection. Mokana pointed out that Nekami and the others were still struggling to save Medaka. Medaka admitted that she no longer cared about other people's feelings. Without hesitation, she dismissed Zenkichi, Kaoki, and Mokana from the student council, saying she had no need for people who could not help her achieve her goal. Unexpectedly, she chose to side with Odo and his group to carry out the Flask plan for her own sake. She even expressed her willingness to marry Odo if it helped her reach that objective. Odo appeared delighted. Itami commented to Yoka that everything seemed to be going according to her expectations. Yoka denied planning any of this and admitted that she simply enjoyed watching former friends fall into conflict. She had expected the student council members to give up after being rejected, yet they were still trying to convince Medaka. Zenkichi stated that he and the others had promised never to leave the student council. Kaoki could not accept seeing Medaka change so completely, and Mokana was heartbroken watching her become so self-centered. Zenkichi was convinced that the person standing before them was not Medaka, but rather Medaka's enemy. Suddenly, Medaka ordered them to kneel. Odo was surprised that she could use such overwhelming words with that level of force. Yoka realized that Medaka had also learned Shigusa's autopilot ability, and she began to understand what truly made Medaka abnormal. Medaka herself felt strangely refreshed, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Kaoki insisted that Medaka would never normally say something like that. Mokana began to fear that the real Medaka was truly gone. At that moment, Maguro stepped forward and questioned whether Medaka was truly certain about what she was saying. He doubted that she had actually freed herself from her burden. Medaka claimed that she no longer had a heart or emotions. Maguro calmly asked why. If that were true, tears were falling from her eyes. Medaka seemed startled when she realized she had been crying without noticing. Maguro explained that people with a heart often find themselves moved in ways they cannot control. He believed that Medaka's memories from 13 years ago had not disappeared after all. Without warning, Zenkichi rushed toward Medaka and struck her with a powerful kick. Odo was surprised to see that Zenkichi could still move despite the effect of her overwhelming words. Zenkichi admitted that he had spent 13 years listening to Medaka's unreasonable demands. He declared that her words no longer weighed him down, and that if the real Medaka still existed inside that body, he would bring her back. Medaka felt confused as she watched Zenkichi, unable to stop her tears. The two began exchanging kicks as they fought. Observing the clash, Odo asked why Itami was not stepping in. Itami refused and criticized Odo for being cruel. At one point, Medaka's kick connected solidly with Zenkichi, causing Mokana to worry. Kaoki tried to reassure everyone that the hit had only grazed him, but it was clear that Zenkichi did not have the advantage now that Medaka had learned how to avoid his attacks. In the middle of the fight, Medaka swung her leg in a way that revealed a hidden syringe. The syringe pierced Zenkichi's body. Yoka was shocked and wondered when Medaka had taken it, only to realize that she had also learned Kei's hidden weapon technique. Yoka understood that Medaka had studied every abnormal ability that had ever been used on her, and had now mastered them all. Maguro said that Medaka could do anything shown to her, yet no one could actually teach her anything. Zenkichi was confident that Medaka would not be able to defeat him with a bundle of empty syringes, because that alone would not be enough to knock him down. Medaka was already serious, and it was not that she was holding back against her childhood friend. Somehow, she kept raining kicks on Zenkichi, yet he never stepped back. They continued facing each other without pause. Medaka felt that the effects of the medicine had not fully worn off, and her memory still felt hazy. She also felt that her focus was not as sharp as it should be, which made her movements less precise. Medaka believed that once she regained that sharpness, she would become perfect again. As Maguro's words echoed in her mind, her memories slowly began to return in order. 15 years earlier, Medaka's mother passed away when Medaka was born. Her mother had suffered a heart attack upon hearing Medaka's first cry. When Medaka first learned this story, she believed that her mother must have been born solely to give birth to her, and then passed away after fulfilling that purpose. After that, Medaka was brought into the Kurokami family. She had never seen her father, yet her stepmother and all her relatives treated her kindly. It almost felt as if the entire Kurokami group had been prepared just to receive her. Even so, Medaka remembered once feeling uncomfortable there. At that moment in the present, Zenkichi managed to land a kick to Medaka's head. Yoka wondered whether Zenkichi's kick had been faster than Medaka's reflexes, or if Medaka had intentionally allowed herself to be struck. It turned out that Medaka had never truly experienced life as a normal baby. Within 3 months, she had read every book available in order to learn. Before her first birthday, Medaka had already absorbed all the knowledge she could find. At first, the adults admired her greatly, but before long they began to feel uneasy and gradually distanced themselves. One day, Medaka received a request from one of her father's friends, a mathematician. Medaka solved the complex problem almost instantly. Not long after that, she heard that the man had resigned from his job. Meanwhile, Zenkichi noticed that Medaka had started to slow down during their sparring sessions. Ever since that mathematician resigned, Medaka began to realize that her existence seemed to disrupt the lives of many adults. Their hard work and sincere efforts appeared meaningless after encountering her. It was a sad realization, yet Medaka felt nothing. She began to question why she had been born into the world. At the age of 2, Medaka was taken outside to a hospital. The hospital was a medical facility for people with unusual abilities like hers. The staff conducted research to understand the purpose behind each patient's unique traits. The doctors believed they could not find answers unless Medaka was thoroughly examined. Even so, Medaka still did not know why she had been born. One day, Medaka met Misagi and asked him why humans were born. Misagi believed that people were born without a purpose, lived without a reason, and died without meaning. He thought Medaka had been brought to that hospital after unintentionally turning many lives upside down. According to Misagi, there was nothing wrong with that, because he believed that both of them were free to do whatever they wanted in a world that ultimately had no purpose. Those words stayed with Medaka. She could not imagine anyone offering a more convincing answer. Medaka eventually convinced herself that her mother's passing and the adult struggles were not her fault. Thinking that way brought her a sense of calm, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. She grew tired of the endless tests and decided to leave the waiting room. That was when she met Zenkichi for the first time. He was trying to solve a puzzle toy, but could not figure it out. Medaka helped him take the puzzle apart. Seeing this, Zenkichi praised her and felt genuinely happy. Medaka told him that there was no need to thank her because it was something very simple. Zenkichi then asked Medaka to solve a Rubik's Cube. Medaka helped him solve all of his puzzle toys. Zenkichi became very excited and kept praising her. Medaka found it strange because to her, those things were ordinary, especially since she believed her birth and life had no meaning. Zenkichi disagreed. He believed that everything had meaning. Medaka asked him why she had been born into the world. Zenkichi said that even though they had just met, Medaka had already made him very happy. From his perspective, Medaka had been born to make everyone happy. Hearing those words deeply moved Medaka. At that moment, Zenkichi ended the fight, feeling frustrated about why Medaka had not tried to dodge his kick. Medaka explained that Zenkichi had no reason to attack her, so she had no reason to avoid it. Tears continued to stream down her face as she assumed Zenkichi had forgotten that it was his words that shaped who she had become. He was the one who gave meaning to her life and helped her discover herself. Those words were no longer just a memory to Medaka. They had become a part of her. Suddenly, Medaka lost control of her emotions and struck Zenkichi. She felt upset because remembering the past changed nothing. Although her past remained a beautiful memory, she had changed because she believed she had been born to constantly improve herself. The impact of her blow sent Zenkichi collapsing to the ground injured. Medaka said that she no longer needed the purpose Zenkichi had given her 13 years ago. Odo could not understand what Medaka meant, but it seemed that Magoro's plan had failed. Magoro realized that the brainwashing ability used by Odo was stronger than he had predicted. Odo wondered why Magoro did not simply return to the original Flask plan. Magoro admitted that the idea did not sound bad, but after losing both of his younger sisters, he no longer cared if the world had to be destroyed as a result. At that moment, Medaka apologized to Zenkichi, saying that she had to end his life. She tightened her grip around his neck, convinced that the only way to stop her tears was by removing him from her life. She believed that without Zenkichi, she would be one step closer to reaching her version of perfection. Zenkichi accepted his fate, saying that he could no longer bear to witness what was happening, and did not resist. Still crying, Medaka asked whether Zenkichi remembered what he had said to her 13 years ago. Zenkichi admitted that he did not fully understand what she was referring to because so much time had passed. However, he remembered telling Medaka that she had been born to bring happiness to everyone. Medaka was surprised that he still remembered. Zenkichi said that from the moment he met her, he had believed those words would come true, and that belief had never changed. Hearing this, Medaka suddenly felt intense pain in her head. She screamed as if struggling against something inside her mind. A powerful surge of energy radiated from her, as though she was trying to undo the brainwashing affecting her. Odo was shocked, realizing that Medaka was capable of using the same mental influence. Yoka commented that brainwashing was an extremely complex process, and if someone tried to reverse it forcefully, nothing might remain. Seeing Medaka in such distress, Zenkichi apologized. He said that if his words were causing her pain, then he did not want her to force herself to remember them. He wondered why, even after being brainwashed, Medaka had still not truly changed. Zenkichi asked her not to hurt herself, not to suffer, and not to cry just to make other people happy. He held Medaka tightly and told her that if she wanted to make others happy, she first needed to find happiness for herself. Suddenly, Medaka stepped back from Zenkichi's embrace and stated that she was not the revised version of Medaka anymore. Mokana and Kaki looked relieved, realizing that Medaka had finally returned to herself. Seeing this, Zenkichi asked what Medaka believed she had been born to do. Medaka answered firmly that she had been born to help others and to make everyone happy alongside her. Yoka realized that Medaka had also absorbed Mizo's abnormal sense of empathy. She commented that humans seemed to constantly influence each other's minds, and that it was not surprising. Maguro responded that if Yoka kept thinking that way, her life would feel miserable, while Medaka was fortunate to have Zenkichi by her side. Odo remarked that the bond between Zenkichi and Medaka was truly fascinating. He then invited Medaka to return, and Medaka declared that she was ready to put an end to the Flask plan. In an effort to stop the Flask plan, Medaka and her friends went through a series of intense confrontations. Medaka first faced Shigusa in battle. During another clash, Zenkichi was pushed to the brink while going up against Kei. Medaka also met her older sister for the first time in 6 years, and at one point Odo nearly manipulated her mind. Medaka made it clear that destroying the Flask plan was her mission. Hearing this, Odo invited her to settle everything on the lowest floor of the facility. Yoka then tossed a knife beside Maguro and urged him to join them. Together, they all headed downstairs. On the way, Yoka remarked that Itami had already struck Medaka and Zenkichi had kicked her as well, so Medaka should have been badly hurt. Yoka offered her a special herbal remedy. Medaka politely refused. Yoka laughed and wondered if Medaka had stopped trusting everyone. Medaka calmly replied that someday she and Yoka would make peace. When they reached the lowest floor, Medaka described the room as something resembling a military intelligence facility. The place felt extremely cold. Without air conditioning, they would have overheated within 5 minutes because there were 131,310 devices running non-stop 24 hours a day, all year long. These machines were used to analyze abnormals. Managing that many systems required someone like Odo. Mizo suddenly removed his mask and revealed that Odo had been running the Flask plan alone. If they could stop him, the plan would come to an end. Odo asked whether Medaka was not impressed by what she was seeing. He explained that this was the Flask plan, and that in their country alone, over 100,000 people had devoted their lives to the project. He questioned whether Medaka truly wanted to make everyone happy. He asked her to imagine a world where humans had no worries, no need for advice, and where everyone could become perfect if the noble goals of the Flask plan were realized. Medaka disagreed, pointing out that Odo intended to use the students of Hakoniwa as test subjects. Odo offered Medaka one last chance. He said he would not insist that she become his wife, but he wanted her to cooperate with the Flask plan. If she did not want anyone to suffer, she could use her brilliant mind to prevent harm while helping the project succeed. According to Odo, that would make everyone happy. Medaka admitted that the offer sounded tempting, but she still refused. Creating perfect humans in her view was impossible. She felt that Odo was even more idealistic than she had ever been. Part of her even envied his ambition, especially if he truly believed he could create or become a perfect human. Still, she believed that humans could never be perfect without their imperfections. As the president of the student council, Medaka wanted students to chase their dreams, but Odo's dream felt like a nightmare. Hearing this, Itami grew very emotional. From Itami's perspective, Medaka's rejection of the Flask plan was also a rejection of her as a robotic human. Odo reminded Itami that she was not strong enough to defeat Medaka. Itami was confused by that statement, since she had already beaten Medaka once, and Odo's own abnormal ability was not suited for combat. Odo brushed this off, claiming that he was extraordinary and possessed a secret technique. He pressed his hand against Itami's body, shocking everyone. Odo explained that he could send an electromagnetic pulse directly to the heart. Through this continuous interference, he could take someone's abnormal ability. This action was known as Yukahashi, and it was Odo's second special skill. Odo claimed that while Medaka could copy at least 20% of someone's abnormal ability, he could take it entirely. He then used Itami's ability to strike Medaka. Odo stated that he had always believed Itami's abnormal power was meant for him. He also claimed that he had just proven Yoka's theory about controlling abnormal personalities. Yoka was devastated seeing Itami's powerless body. She begged Itami to open her eyes. In tears, Yoka apologized to Maguro for once saying that she only wanted unhappiness. She promised to make up for it, by doing anything Maguro asked. She pleaded with Maguro to heal Itami, explaining that Itami was a friend who mattered more to her than any rule. Odo mocked Yoka for begging help from an enemy. He remarked that only Mizo was worthy of standing beside him. But at that moment Mizo was lying on the ground, overwhelmed by the pain Itami had felt when Odo attacked her heart. Odo then told Medaka to get up, fight him, lose, and die, because he could take Medaka's abnormal ability with his secret technique and move one step closer to perfection. Medaka asked whether Odo truly considered himself human. Odo confirmed that he was. Medaka then shifted into her combat mode and drove her elbow into Odo's stomach. She stated that when facing Odo, she preferred to turn herself into a monster. Odo lived alone on the streets for 7 years, from the age of 6 to 12. He had the ability to steal other people's powers. Even so, he chose not to use his abnormalities to defy the world. To him, those abilities felt more like a misfortune than a gift he was born with. At the age of 6, he made his first test by trying to control his own abnormality. He decided to leave his parents because he believed they would try to take advantage of him if they ever found out about his powers. He felt deep sadness when he left home, but his conscience would not allow him to manipulate his parents' minds. He dreamed of using his powers someday to guide the world toward peace and happiness. During the 7 years before he was finally found, he used his ability only to understand it better. He never experimented on anyone else and refused to sacrifice others for his own growth. Through intense mental training and visualization, Odo continued to develop himself. The speech he had prepared in his mind was meant to encourage people to enjoy life, take care of their friends and family, and seek happiness. However, when the moment came, the words that left his mouth were an order for everyone to kneel. No one knew what Odo would do in the 3 years before he eventually arrived at Hakoniwa Academy. At the same time, Medaka took on a different form and admitted that she preferred herself as a monster. She tried to use her ability to command Odo, but he refused to obey her because he saw himself as a king. The two of them clashed fiercely, using the full extent of their abilities. Meanwhile, Maguro was checking on Itami's condition. Yoka asked whether Itami would be okay. Maguro told him not to worry and reminded him of the words he had once said. He asked Yoka to promise that he would never wish for his own unhappiness, and Yoka agreed. As Medaka and Odo's battle continued, Odo used Itami's abnormality that he had previously stolen. Unexpectedly, the force of his kick was strong enough to shatter concrete. If Medaka had tried to block it directly, her arm could have been seriously injured. To Odo's surprise, Medaka launched another attack and explained that she had already healed the injury from his kick by using Itami's healing ability. He had not expected her to use healing as a form of defense. Odo grew frustrated and questioned whether Medaka still considered herself human. She denied it and stated that she was a monster. At that moment, Odo believed she must have been using one of his stolen abnormalities. Maguro corrected him. He explained that Odo's ability to steal other people's abnormalities only worked by taking the target's power itself. Odo, still irritated, asked what Medaka's abnormality truly was. Maguro explained that Medaka could do anything other people could do, and even things they could not. He believed Yoka had already figured out the answer. Maguro wondered why Yoka had not told everyone, even though he was a supervisor of the Flask Plan. Yoka explained that he had not felt anything when Medaka was repeatedly attacked by Muri. Afterward, she used Chigusa's reflex ability and could switch it on or off at will. The same applied to Mizo's ability. Her abnormality was so profound that she could sense the suffering of others, yet Medaka could freely decide when to activate or deactivate that sensitivity. That was why Medaka could treat the heaviest burdens as if they were nothing, and even reset her own mindset when necessary. In the end, she gained full control while in her former war mode, a state that previously required her to lose control. Medaka could now fully command herself and use 120% of her power. Hearing this, Odo was shocked. He had spent 7 years trying and failing to achieve that level of control, yet Medaka managed to do it. She did not take other people's abilities. Instead, she mastered and perfected them. Maguro stated that Odo's level was close to Medaka's. While Odo could use other abnormalities at full strength, Medaka could use them in their perfected form. According to Maguro, if Odo could perfect his own abnormality, he might be able to stand against Medaka. Odo was stunned by this idea. Maguro added that the headmaster had been carefully observing Medaka's movements all along. If he had known earlier, he would have done everything in his power to keep Medaka away from the situation. Medaka then stated that she was not perfect. She described herself as a monster pretending to be human and simply playing around. Odo felt anger when he heard her say that. Many members of Class 13 had risked everything to refine their abnormalities, yet Medaka referred to it as nothing more than a game. Odo referred to himself as a king, and Medaka might have seemed like a monster in his eyes. Still, he believed that Medaka had no right to possess abnormalities that surpassed his own. Medaka calmly sensed that Odo seemed hungry and invited him to take her abnormality as he pleased. Zenkichi was confused by what Medaka was saying. Maguro told Zenkichi not to worry, because Medaka clearly had no hesitation about ruining Flask's plan. Odo used his power to steal Medaka's abnormality, convinced that doing so would allow him to control it. He became overjoyed and prepared himself to become like Medaka. However, only moments later, he felt himself sinking into darkness. His body slowly seemed to fade, and he encountered a frightening girl within that void. Odo panicked and screamed in terror. Not long after, he was thrown back while still attempting to take Medaka's abnormality. Odo could not believe that Medaka lived alongside something like that within herself. He had never imagined that darkness and a terrifying presence existed inside her. Unwilling to face that reality, he called Medaka a monster. Then he fell silent when Medaka stared at him. Odo admitted defeat and no longer saw himself as a king. He promised to shut down the Flask plan and asked Medaka for forgiveness. Medaka asked if that was all he had to say. Odo then promised to make sure that Mizo and Itami would be safe. He also swore that he would make up for all the people who had been sacrificed for the Flask plan. Once again, Medaka asked if that was everything he wanted to say. Odo added another promise. He would no longer use his weighted words to steal other people's abnormalities, and he would stop doing harmful things altogether. Medaka still asked if that was all. Odo did not know what else he could possibly say. Medaka firmly reminded him that when someone does something wrong, the proper thing to say is an apology. Odo immediately dropped to his knees and apologized to Medaka. Medaka forgave him, leaving everyone around them in shock. Zenkichi and the others had completed their task, although some concerns remained. The student council members were assigned to erase the data on the computers. Medaka commented that the task was a hassle and suggested that destroying the computers entirely would be easier. Odo had completely given up after witnessing the darkness within Medaka, and Medaka chose to forgive him. Zenkichi, however, had hoped Odo would be made to struggle more, because he believed that forgiveness was not a miracle cure that could be handed out so easily. After that, they all rode the same elevator and chatted like normal high school students. Seeing Zenkichi unusually quiet, Maguro asked what was wrong with him. Zenkichi brushed it off by saying he was hungry and thinking about what he would eat for dinner. He even started thinking about inviting Hansode to go eat yakiniku with him. Medaka then asked Odo to use his weighted words to stop the students who were still fighting on the first floor. Odo agreed to do it. However, when they arrived, they were met with a disturbing sight. All of the students were pinned down in the same way. There was no clear winner or loser in that struggle. Zenkichi could not understand how it had happened, or whether they had somehow taken each other down at the same time. Suddenly, someone appeared and stated that it was impossible for them to have done that to each other. All 14 of them had been struck in the exact same manner, and no abnormality would allow someone to harm themselves like that. He was certain that a third party was responsible. He wondered why anyone would entertain themselves with such a cruel display. That person was Misagi. Medaka felt irritated when she saw him, while Misagi greeted her with his usual smile. Najimi, the mastermind behind the Flask plan and the founder of Hakoniwa Academy, explained that during last week's broadcast, Odo and the other 13 members of his group had been defeated by Medaka. Those who hated the Flask plan had been neutralized and peace at the school had returned, though it was now dominated by abnormals. As expected, new enemies had already begun to appear. Their struggles would continue long after the anime ended. On one hand, everything seemed to be wrapping up, but on the other hand, their real battles were only just beginning. Naoto would reveal himself sooner or later, but that was a story for another time. For now, Najimi needed material for the next episode because the writer had not planned things out precisely. The next part of Medaka's story would focus on Misagi, the weakest among the weak. Misagi was a man capable of ruining everything through a strange blend of good and bad intentions. This episode would explore the time before Misagi met Medaka, when he was still a student at Susu Academy. Back then, Misagi had the nickname of a kind loser. One day, a girl named Saiki rushed to school and panicked. She was a student at Susu Academy and arrived just as her name was being called during attendance. Her classmates stared at her as she entered the classroom. Sho had just been asked to leave because his hair color had changed. Without wasting time, Saiki headed straight to the student council room to find Misagi. She complained loudly about what had happened to her hair. Misagi calmly mentioned that it was Monday of the first week of the month, which meant it was time for him to read the weekly Shonen Jump magazine. He greeted Saiki and wondered if her hair issue was somehow preventing him from reading. He looked at her hair, which was now brightly colored, and remarked that he had no intention of removing her from the council over it. Saiki admitted that she never really took care of her hair because she hated drawing attention to herself. She had only joined the student council in the first place because Misagi had asked for her help. Misagi then asked why she had changed her hair color. Saiki believed that Fude, known for his mastery over colors, must have been responsible because only he could do something like that. She realized Misagi might not recognize the situation because the previous student council president, Aiki, had been expelled before Misagi enrolled at the school. Misagi concluded that the former president must have returned, and that Fude had come back as well, turning Saki's hair blonde in the process. Fude had the ability to control colors. Saiki found it strange that Misagi did not seem surprised by this. Misagi said it all made sense because the weekly Shonen Jump magazine itself looked unusually colorful. Saiki was shocked when she saw how vibrant the pages were. Misagi wondered if this was some kind of message directed at him as the new student council president, with Saki's hair serving as a sign. He then suggested they go meet the color person. Saiki agreed, since she needed Fude to restore her hair to normal. Misagi laughed and said they would teach Fude a lesson. He added that in Shonen Jump, color was usually reserved for popular or newly launched series, often printed on recycled paper. Meanwhile, Fude was busy painting. He had managed to return to school through questionable means. When he saw Misagi approaching, he greeted him. Fude introduced himself as someone who preferred to be alone. Misagi asked who Fude was painting. Fude explained that the person in the painting was Aiki, the former student council president whom Misagi had defeated in the past. Misagi laughed and commented that Aiki must have gone through a lot. Fude wondered why Misagi seemed so amused and explained that Aiki had not actually been expelled but had chosen to leave so she would not interfere with the school's operations. Misagi remarked that the story sounded sweet and sentimental. Without warning, he damaged the painting and casually stated that he had treated Aki's kindness in a similar way. He reminded Fude that altering Saki's hair also meant interfering with something connected to him, and he could not understand why Saki was defending Fude. Saki pointed out that her hair did not belong to Misagi. Fude then tore his own painting apart, calling it a form of artistic expression. He believed Misagi might have ruined the painting in a careless way, but he himself had destroyed it with intention and style. The situation quickly became tense, but instead of focusing on harm, Fude used his color-based abilities in an unusual way. He splashed dye toward Misagi, turning Misagi's black clothing bright pink. Fude claimed that anyone wearing pink would never be able to intimidate others again, no matter what kind of power they possessed. Saki explained that Fude's ability was the beauty of color. Misagi understood that Fude's attack would not be able to damage his pride. The attack would not work, especially after he had removed his clothes. Fude immediately covered Misagi with blue pigment, and his body began to look as if it were covered in bruises. Misagi felt intense pain and collapsed, unable to move. Saki grew worried and asked what Fude had done to him. She said the marks on Misagi's body looked terrifying and wondered whether he could use his fiction ability to restore himself. Fude calmly stated that it would be impossible. The blue marks were not bruises at all, but simply color. She had only added layers of pigment to his body. She had never struck him, which meant he had never actually been injured. Because of that, Misagi could not undo something that technically did not exist. According to Fude, color could control emotions. Misagi's senses interpreted the blue as bruises, influenced his feelings, and eventually caused real pain to appear. If fiction could undo anything, then all Fude had to do was create something that was never real in the first place. Fude remarked that Misagi was a hopeless loser, and Saiki could not believe that he had been defeated yet again. Later, Misagi was seen with Najimi. She asked how he had died that time and mentioned that she might have to wait a little longer, since Misagi still had not found an ability user capable of truly defeating him. Najimi tried to cheer him up, while Medaka responded coldly and ignored the situation.